Welcome to Anime T23, where we dive deep into the most intriguing what-if scenarios in the anime universe. In today's episode, we explore a world where Naruto Uzumaki, the future hero of Konoha, to protect his brother. Join us as we uncover how Naruto's become Shinobi. To protect his brother transforms into his greatest strength. What if Naruto parents died, and Naruto becomes Shinobi to protect his brother? Part 5. Chapter 21. You've been framed. Naruto took a moment to gaze fondly at his kids as they slept. Where had the years gone? It felt like it had only been a few months since he had dropped off a tiny, excitable Ryo for his first day at the academy. He had blinked and suddenly Sasuke had joined their tight-knit family, like he was meant to be there all along. Now 3 years later, they were about to start their final year at the academy. This time next year, they would be Genin. He was so proud of how far they had come. "We're going to be late if you don't wake them up soon," Kazuya pointed out from the front door. "We get it. You're a proud Ka-san." "Fuck off." Naruto threw him a dirty look. "I'm a proud Ni-san." Kazuya rolled his eyes fondly, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were still red from crying, but Naruto was just trying to treat him like he always did. He didn't think his friend would appreciate being treated like glass right now. He had no idea what it was like to break up with someone, but he imagined it hurt. Naruto didn't like people treating him differently when he was hurt, so he thought Kazuya would be the same. Naruto flipped through the one-handed seals. Suiton, Shigure. He kept the chakra input low and focused on control, splashing first Ryo then Sasuke. He could have just flung water at them from a mug, but why waste a chance to practice his Suten jutsu? What that? Fuck off Ni-san. Ryo wriggled in his chair, pulling at the rope that bound his hands. Sasuke blinked beside him, taking a bit longer to wake up. The water rolled down their faces onto their pajama shirts, and Naruto grinned widely at the pair. "Morning." He greeted them cheerily, ignoring Ryo's roars of rage. "To commemorate your last first day of school, we have a new training exercise for you." Sasuke appeared to fully regain awareness as he sent his usual uchiha death glare his way. After many early mornings of being subjected to it, Naruto shrugged it off. "Class starts in an hour. You need to untie yourselves to make it to your first day without a tardy being put on your record." He glanced over at Ryo. "Or should I say another one?" The blonde's rage subsided slightly at that comment. "We've hidden the clocks and breakfast is in the fridge. We'll be back in a month or so. Love you lots, don't burn the place to the ground, and remember to feed Momo." He turned and swept out the door, grabbing his sandals and bag on the way out. He smiled as he closed the door, the sounds of indignation carrying through the wood. You'd think they'd be used to this by now. Kazuya mused beside him as they headed down the stairs. "We spring something on them every time we go away on a Hari mission." "They'll forgive us?" Naruto laughed, dodging around the villagers as they reached the street. "They know this is useful, and this is still nowhere near as bad as the glitter incident." "Ryo was dumping that glitter into our clothes for weeks," Kazuya shuddered, his eyes haunted. "Not like we could tell," Naruto shrugged. "It was fucking everywhere. Last time we used it, in a training exercise." They fell into a comfortable silence as they navigated the bustling streets of Konoha. Naruto almost spoke up a couple of times, but he stopped himself. Kazuya would talk about what happened with Tetsuya-san when he was ready. The older boy had only said enough to stop Naruto from hunting the man down for hurting his friend. They finally came to their destination and Naruto paused for a moment, checking the chakra signatures inside. He nodded to Kazuya, and they slammed the door open. "Congratulations!" Tenten turned to them and beamed. "Naruto-ni? Kazuya-ni? I thought you were on a mission today." "We're heading off right after this, but did you really think we would leave without celebrating with our favorite weapons mistress?" Kazuya grinned, hugging her tightly and swinging her around the shop. "You're a genin." Naruto laughed. "It feels like just yesterday you were staring up at me and telling me that I was too small to be in the academy. Now look at you. Too big for the academy." He wiped a fake tear away as Tenten stared at him in embarrassment. "Naruto-ni, I'm not a kid anymore." "You'll always be my little girl," Tenjiro teased, walking from the back of the shop with a familiar face. "Ah, Naruto-ni, Kazuya-ni, this is my new teammate." Tenten started, but she was cut off by the tall boy snapping into a deep bow. Naruto-sensei, I am eternally grateful for all your support and wisdom. I could not have earned this Hitai 8 without your training and guidance. I will forever be your devoted pupil. Naruto sighed, a sweat drop forming on his forehead. I keep telling you, Lee, you don't have to call me sensei. I was just helping you out until you got a real teacher. You earned that Hitai 8 all on your own. I just pushed you in the right direction. You did all the work. Wait, you two know each other? Naruto looked over at Kazuya, the older boy's face twisted in confusion. He hadn't told Kazuya about Lee. He had just been so busy, and he hadn't really been home, and it hadn't seemed important at the time. Naruto had agreed to help Lee. It had nothing to do with Kazuya. I've just been helping him out with his taijutsu and weapon handling. He shrugged, silently willing Lee to keep his mouth shut for once. Naruto-sensei is the reason I stand before you today as a genin of Konoha. You should have known better. So you're both on the same genin team then? He swiftly moved the conversation along. What number? Who's your sensei? While it was the desk who dealt with the genin team assignments, Naruto wasn't the chunin in charge of them this year. He knew the Hokage had a hand in them, and that was as good a reason as any to stay far away from that particular task. Team 9 with Guy-sensei. Kazuya choked beside him. That's great? Naruto tried to remain casual, but too many alarm bells were ringing in his head. He's a respected Junin and a hard worker. He heard Kazuya muttering under his breath, he's going to kill them. He says that we're in the springtime of youth, Lee replied excitedly, and Naruto could feel his soul leave his body. He's a bit weird but really strong, Tenten commented from beside the boy. He beat us all in a sparring match, 3-1. Naruto shared a look with Tenjiro, but the man had the audacity to just look amused, completely underestimating the gravity of the situation. Maito Guy, run 1,000 times around Konoha on his hands for fun, Guy had been assigned 3 fresh, impressionable genin. Genin, if they were told to climb a cliff one-handed with no chakra, would have no choice but to climb that cliff one-handed with no chakra. Did Guy remember what it was like to be a genin with little genin bodies that had limits? Naruto respected the hell out of the man, but his training regime would scar Naruto for life. It had been bad enough following the Junin's watered-down regime. Don't you two have to head off soon? Tenjiro was struggling to contain his chuckles at their horrified faces. Yes, we do. Naruto sighed dramatically. All right, hug time. He brought Lee in first and wheezed as the taller boy squeezed tightly. He tapped his shoulder weakly and the genin let go. I'm really proud of you, Lee. He couldn't help but speak up. You've come so far in a year. I can't wait to see how far you go with a real teacher. Lee's big round eyes welled up, and Naruto patted his head gently. He hugged Tenten next, and he felt the same well of pride. Make sure to keep them all in line, okay? He said somewhat seriously. You're the sensible one of the bunch, and I don't even know your third teammate. You gotta make sure they look after themselves. Was that what you did? Tenten asked quietly. Naruto snorted loudly. Hell no, that was all Kazuya, he chuckled. He hesitated before he spoke up again. I promised I'd help you with your sealing techniques when you graduated. When I come back from this mission, we can see where your calligraphy is at, okay? Tenten's face lit up, and Naruto smiled gently. He'd known her since she was 4. He'd watched her grow up into the kunoichi she was today. He had been there when she had lost her first tooth by banging her face into the counter. He had been her training dummy when she had been learning to style hair. He had gotten her first bowl of ramen. He'd watched her when her mother was out of the village, and Tenjiro was overwhelmed with work. You're the best, Naruto-ni. He grinned back at her. Keep it our secret, huh? He winked exaggeratedly. Can't have the whole village knowing that. Kazuya scanned the horizon. It hadn't changed for 2 days. Sand, nothing but sand. He had no idea how the Sunanin lived like this. He had managed to avoid the desert until now, and he would strive to avoid it after this. Sand just got everywhere. He was so glad his grandfather had moved to Konoha. He glanced over to Naruto. His friend was running along at a steady pace, hair tied tightly in a high bun, and a black scarf covering his mouth and nose against the sand, blowing into their faces. He was in his regular black mission gear, although he had opted for a sleeveless shirt, same as Kazuya, for the heat of the desert. His brace was firmly in place, but he had an arm guard covering his right forearm. It was a small difference, but it somehow aged him. Kazuya knew he hadn't been around much over the past year. Between the shifts at the hospital, the extra training with the poisons department, and Tetsuya, he had barely slept in his own bed. A sharp pang shot through his heart at the thought of his ex-boyfriend. 10 months, and it was all over. It had been so amazing. Tetsuya had been so amazing. There had been so much he shared with him, so much that he got to do for the first time. It had been affirming and flattering to know that there was someone who wanted to spend time with him, who sought his company, who wanted only him in every sense of the word. They had just been arguing so much over the last month. Tetsuya was frustrated that he kept being passed over for promotion, while Kazuya kept rising in the department. He wasn't about to sacrifice his career, so Kazuya decided it was best to just break it off. Tetsuya hadn't exactly fought to keep him either. It was only when Tetsuya was absent from his life that Kazuya realized how much time he had dedicated to the man. 3 days after they broke up, he'd had a day off, and as Kazuya sat alone in his kitchen, he'd realized he had no idea what everyone was up to. He couldn't even remember the last time he had hung out with Hana or Genma-sensei. He had kept canceling on their team dinners the last 5 months to meet up with Tetsuya. He knew Ryo and Sasuke had the academy, but he had lost track of their progress. Naruto was probably the biggest mystery. He hadn't even noticed that his best friend had taken on an academy student. Even as the redhead ran, he looked older. How had Kazuya missed it? He had shot up at least a couple inches. What else had he missed? Now he'd had time to process the breakup itself. Kazuya couldn't quite believe how wrapped up in the man he had become. He had completely pushed aside all his friends to spend as much time with him as possible. He had never thought he would be that type of guy. He was a terrible friend. It was a miracle they were all still talking to him. "You're being dumb." Kazuya's head snapped over so he could stare at the redhead. Blue eyes gazed back impassively. "What are talking about, Akachan?" he demanded. "I didn't say anything." Naruto rolled his eyes. "Kaz, I've known you for almost 10 years. I know when you're being a dick to yourself." Kazuya opened his mouth but closed it, grateful for the scarf covering his own face. He had no argument for that. "I'm sorry," he finally admitted. "I know I haven't been around lately, and I know that had to put more pressure on you. Things with Tetsuya just got intense, and I couldn't balance anything." Naruto's face was unreadable. "Kazuya, you know you shouldn't feel guilty about living your own life, right?" "Wait, what?" he frowned. "Naruto, you guys are a huge part of my life. I know I haven't been around much lately, but you are very much a huge, very permanent part of my life. I'm not really living it without you guys there." "Kaz." Naruto hunched his shoulders, and Kazuya narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "I'm not going to be here for most of your life. I'm destined to die young, you know? Ryo and Sasuke are going to grow up and live lives of their own. You have to find something for yourself." Something cold and heavy dropped to the pit of Kazuya's stomach. "Naruto, that's not for another decade at least. You're not showing any signs of ill health outside of the odd cold here and there. Ryo and Sasuke will still need us even when they're all grown up. You don't grow out of family." Naruto just stared at him for a long moment. "Yeah, I know." He scratched the back of his head, his eyes wrinkled in the corners in an approximation of a smile. "I just worry about you." "Akachan, I'm supposed to worry about you," Kazuya grinned back. Naruto was about to reply when he cocked his head. He knew that look. "What are you sensing?" "Suna, we're less than an hour out." "Thank fuck, I hate the desert." Naruto laughed. "Come on, this mission isn't that bad," he chuckled. "Really, this should have been classified as a C rank, but it got bumped up to a B rank due to the value of the package. Usually there's a threat of enemy nin on B ranks, but there wasn't for this mission, just a straightforward transport and delivery." Kazuya shot his friend a dirty look. "Now you've jinxed it." "I have not." Naruto weaved his way through the streets of Suna, Kazuya close on his heels. They had to drop off the package at the administrative offices near the Kazekage offices. He wasn't sure how his team had avoided being sent to Suna in the 7 years since graduation, but as he listened to Kazuya swear, maybe it was a good thing. His friend really did hate sand. He wasn't sure how to process his words yet. While he really did want Kazuya to find something for himself outside of their family, a small selfish part of him was happy that he broke up with Tetsuya-san. He had just felt like their friendship didn't hold the same value as Kazuya's romantic relationship, despite lasting almost a decade longer. Like the moment romance came into the picture, friendship suddenly didn't matter as much. He just didn't get why things had to be that way. He didn't get why friends were less important than romantic partners. Maybe he would understand if he dated someone, but he couldn't see that for himself. He had Kazuya, Ryo, Sasuke, Genma-sensei, Hana, Hijiri, Raito. The list was almost endless nowadays. He didn't need anything more. His family and friends would always be enough for him. That has to be the place. Naruto followed Kazuya's pointed finger to the large building up ahead. All the buildings in Suna tended to look the same, the tall clay buildings almost appearing to have been molded from pure sand. This monochrome effect made it difficult to differentiate one structure from another, as there were no distinguishing signs or colors to say what they were. Even the windows blended into the walls of the buildings. Naruto could imagine that in a sandstorm, Suna would totally fade into the background. The building in question sat in the dead center of the village, shaped like an orb with a large kanji in the center. He nodded. Looks important enough. They made their way forward, kicking up sand which swirled around them in the slight breeze. They could barely even see the sky. It was just tan and beige as far as the eye could see. Tactically, it was an incredible advantage for Sunanin, but Naruto had no idea how they didn't just go nuts at the never-ending monotone of it all. They reached the front doors, and he stepped through, failing to hide a sigh of relief at the sudden change in temperature. Konoha may have been in the land of fire, but it had nothing on Suna. He felt his clothes sticking to him uncomfortably, and mentally groaned. They still had the trip back. Kazuya was right. The desert sucked. The inside of the building was much cooler, although he would still compare it to a warm day back home. He approached the large desk, two Sunanin eyeing him warily. "Hi, I'm Uzumaki Naruto from Konoha, and this is Arai Kazuya." He grinned, although it was hidden by his scarf. "We're here to drop off a package on behalf of Takeyama-san. I need you to sign for it and we'll be on our way." "And why are Shinobi from Konoha delivering packages to Suna?" The one on the right asked snidely, crossing his arms. "Not my job to ask," Naruto shrugged, reaching into his pocket to grab the storage scroll. "We were just assigned the mission, and we came." "Of course," the woman glared. "Why ask why you're taking missions away from your supposed ally?" "Look, take it up with Takeyama-san," Kazuya spoke up from behind him. "We don't have anything to do with this political bullshit." The female Sunanin threw a filthy look towards his friend, but she snatched the delivery paperwork out of his hands regardless. Naruto unsealed the box from the scroll and dumped it in front of the sour-looking male nin. The woman violently scribbled something on the page, and Kazuya swiped it back. "As lovely as it has been catching up with our allied village," Kazuya drawled, and Naruto held back a snort at the brunette's badly concealed sarcasm. Naruto waved to the Suna pair, and his grin widened as their glares deepened. Although Suna was supposed to be their ally, their current relations were a bit tenuous at the moment. Suna's relationship with its daimyo was strained at best, which meant that members of the court, who would have before gone to Suna for missions, were now branching out to Konoha and Taki. This led to Suna's current financial troubles as their reputation was slowly chipped away, which meant even less missions and money coming in. They left the building, and Naruto frowned at the wall of hot air that hit him. What he wouldn't give right now for a cold shower. They had made it to the end of the street when the sound of an explosive tag rang through the village, blowing a cloud of sand into their backs. Naruto pulled out a kunai instinctively and whipped around, falling into his taijutsu stance. He didn't have to look over at Kazuya to know he had done the same. Naruto had had enough experience modifying explosive tags to know how big the detonation had to be to reach that volume. When no enemy approached them, Naruto shoved his kunai back into his pouch and ran back to the administrative offices. They hit a cloud of smoke, and the sand swirled aggressively, having been displaced by the explosion. He followed the chakra signatures until he reached what was supposed to be the front door of the building. It had been blown away, leaving a massive hole. A crater sat where the desk had been, and Naruto swallowed as he realized there was no way for the two Sunanin to survive, not at that range. Debris was strewn across the floor, and several Sunanin were investigating the scene. Naruto looked around in horror. The windows had been blown out and the ceiling was barely intact, dropping dust onto the shinobi. As they approached, one woman turned towards them. She was dressed in the regular Suna uniform, half of her face covered. "That's them!" Naruto took a step back in confusion. "They dropped that package off," she screamed. "I saw them outside. They were the ones who set it off. They made the hand seals just before the bomb went off. It was Konoha." "Wait, what?" They had dropped something off, but they hadn't made any hand signs. They had been walking away, not hanging around the building. "Hang on! We didn't do this!" Kazuya yelled back. "Arrest them!" A man in a Junin uniform ordered. Naruto reached over and grabbed Kazuya, rattling through the hand signs. Just before they disappeared, the woman who had yelled smiled, and Naruto narrowed his eyes, trying to memorize her chakra. They shined and ended up in an alley, narrowly avoiding the shuriken thrown their way. Kazuya shook off Naruto's grip and began to pace, his knuckles white as they gripped his hair. "Why did you do that?" he demanded. "Running is just going to make us look guiltier." "Staying wouldn't have made things any better, Kazuya?" Naruto retorted, trying to get control of his breathing. "We've been set up." "Of course we've been fucking set up." Kazuya exploded. "That was our package that blew up. Why didn't you know there were explosive seals in it?" "I'm not fucking psychic." Naruto screamed back, tears beginning to well in his eyes. "Protocol is we don't open the package, Kazuya. You know that. I can't sense seals unless they're active. That package didn't have an ounce of chakra for me to sense." They both glared at each other, breathing heavily. "What are we going to do?" Kazuya's eyes filled with horror, his voice quiet. "If Suna thinks Konoha was responsible, this could mean war." "We just have to find the real culprits," Naruto answered just as quietly. "Oh, like that's going to be so easy," Kazuya rolled his eyes. "Takayama is in the land of fire somewhere, and Suna is going into lockdown as we speak." "That woman said she saw someone set it off," Naruto pointed out. "So that means that someone is still in Suna. We just need to find them." "But you have no idea who that was." "We start with her," Naruto insisted. "She smiled at me just before we left. No one would smile so soon after their own was murdered, especially at the scene of the crime. I got her signature." Kazuya pushed the heels of his hands into his eyes, groaning. "Okay, fine, we start with her, but for the record, after we clear our names, I am never coming to Suna again." Naruto rolled his eyes. Genma stole a piece of chicken from Raido's takeout box, grinning at his unimpressed stare. "You shouldn't have saved it all for last. You shouldn't have eaten all of yours first." Raido waved away Genma's lingering chopsticks. He chuckled as he pulled them back. Raido may complain, but he knew better. The older man always left Genma's favorite bits until the end, and Genma always stole them. They'd been this way since they were Chunin. "Should have known I'd find you two here." Asuma dropped himself into the seat opposite them. The Junin standby station was pretty busy at this time of day, most taking a break for lunch. Kurenai took a seat next to him, and Genma raised an eyebrow. Those two had been closer than usual since Asuma had come back to Konoha. "Where else would we be?" Genma smirked, stabbing his chopsticks into what was left of his noodles. "Where have you guys been? We missed you at the bar last weekend." "Some of us have missions, you know." Asuma smirked back, nodding a greeting to Raido. "Since your team graduated, you've become way too relaxed." "I resent that." Genma popped his senbon back in his mouth. "They still give me way too much to do." "They're working full-time, though," Kurenai frowned. "You don't have missions with them, do you?" "Nope." Genma popped the P. "A Genin team is a lifelong thing. I'll be responsible for those kids even if they make Junin." "He can't say no if they ask him for stuff," Raido added, dodging Genma's elbow. "You make it sound like I'm whipped." "You are." "I am not." "You kind of are," Asuma interjected, and Genma glared at him. "Why's Genma whipped? Sounds kinky. Was it Raido?" Kakashi appeared next to them, nose deep in an orange book. Kakashi? Kurenai gasped. You can't read that in public. Kakashi waved a dismissive hand at her. Genma grinned nervously as Raito turned to look at him. He had bought that book for Kakashi for the guy's 21st birthday, mostly as a joke but also because he thought the Junin needed to relax, maybe help him get laid. He hadn't expected the younger man to flaunt it around the village. His Junin team. Raito answered, moving his gaze to Kakashi. Kakashi nodded, eyes not leaving the pages. Still got those monthly dinners? Yep, Genma nodded before his smile dropped. Although Kazuya hasn't been turning up lately, he's too busy with that Tetsuya guy at the hospital. I heard they broke up, Kurenai spoke up. Anko was talking about it with the gate Chunin. Genma turned to stare at her. How had he not heard about this? It's true, Kakashi added. When I was round a couple of weeks ago picking up Ryo, Kazuya was moping around. Naruto confirmed it when I saw him at the desk. Damn, I'm going to have to drag him to the next dinner. Genma bit down on his senbon. The first breakup is the worst. How's the Uzumaki doing, though? Asuma leaned forward. Taking on too much as usual, Genma sighed. It's like he doesn't know the meaning of taking it easy. Every time I see him, he's added something to his to-do list. I've had to physically haul him to dinner more than once because he hadn't eaten all day. I'm worried about him. But he's achieved so much, Kurenai frowned. He's pretty high up at the desk now, and pretty much every department is after him for his seals. That's an incredible achievement for someone his age. He's only 14. But he's also raising 2 kids, Genma pointed out. It's too much for an adult, never mind a kid. Naruto has never thought of himself as a kid, Kakashi interjected. And that's a part of the problem, Genma heaved a sigh. At least Hana doesn't cause me undue stress, he grinned slightly, although it rang hollow. That girl's got a good head on his shoulders. And her clan is looking after her, Kakashi added. Where are those 2 anyway? Asuma asked. I haven't seen either of them around the village. Genma leaned back into the sofa, resting his shoulder against Raito's. Naruto mentioned that they both had a mission to Suna. They're probably still away. It was just a package delivery, so they'll be back in a few days. If they don't run into bandits or something. Genma dismissed Asuma's words. Those 2 have 100% mission success rate. They're not ones we have to worry about getting the job done, just when it comes to them taking care of themselves. They're probably sightseeing or something like that. Naruto dived out of view as he felt more ambush shoot past them on the rooftops above. He remained frozen until he felt them leave the area. He already hated being a fugitive, and it had only been an hour. Are they gone? He turned to Kazuya, still trying to adjust to the other's new appearance. Yeah, for now. They had stolen some black sludge that was working well as hair dye. Naruto was over Kazuya's complaints that it would be impossible to wash out. They had bigger problems. His friend had managed to steal some plain beige shirt and pants, and had wrapped his head like the Suna civilians did. Naruto was using his Seikentan seal, his long red hair now black with dye and a long beige dress fitted to his form. Their black mission gear would stand out too much against the beige background. They passed as civilians, but Naruto didn't want to push it. This blows, Kazuya threw his hands up. All we've gotten in the past hour is that people wearing our faces blew up the offices. There are Anbu everywhere looking for us. We can't get back to Konoha, and we can't find that woman. We're getting close, Naruto snapped back. Kazuya sighed heavily. I know, it's just stressful, you know? He dragged a hand down his face. This is big. Like if we fuck this up, things are going to go so badly. We've covered a good part of Suna and there's no sign of her. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I think we need to go back to the offices. That's where she was last seen, and they didn't succeed in their attack against the Kazekage. I think they're going to try again. So you want us to go back to the scene of the crime? Kazuya frowned. Like every criminal who gets caught does. They're not going to recognize us. Naruto dragged him towards the street. We aren't using a detectable henge, we're dressed as civilians, and they're looking for 2 guys. We'll be fine. He ignored Kazuya's stressed grumbling as they walked down the street, blending in with the foot traffic. The civilians knew there'd been an attack, but most of the information had been kept from the public. Naruto was pretty sure Suna didn't have a sensor like him, otherwise they would have been found by now. They finally came up to the remains of the admin office. The structure now reinforced by Doton Jutsu. Naruto leaned against a wall further down the street, closing his eyes. He searched through the surrounding signatures, dismissing the small civilian one. The woman hadn't felt like the rest of the Suna nin did. The desert nin felt like a breath of fresh air, but she'd felt nothing like that. If there was anything he could compare it to, it was probably like a lesser version of the Aburame clan without the warmth that he associated with Konoha nin. He snapped his eyes open. There? Where? Come on! Naruto ran off, following the signature before he lost it. He could feel Kazuya close behind him and as ran up a wall and landed on the roof. He wasn't far behind. The woman from earlier whirled around. What are you doing? The fugitives were confirmed to have fled the area. You're wasting your time here. I don't think we're wasting our time, Naruto growled. Her eyes narrowed before it clicked. You. Kazuya darted forward before she could finish her sentence. She just barely dodged his fist. Naruto hung back, letting Kazuya handle her, but ready to jump in if needed. Kazuya ducked beneath her leg and reached up to grab it, shoving it skyward with a grunt. She yelped as her back landed on the roof, Kazuya still gripping her leg. Her hinge dropped, revealing her black hair and purple shirt. She wore a black bandana around her head and a belt styled to look like a tail. She swiped at him with a kunai, and Kazuya was forced to let go as she drew blood. She flipped back up and started to form hand seals. Naruto clicked his tongue in annoyance and shunshined, appearing behind her and bashing the back of her head. She dropped like a stone as Kazuya pouted at him. I had her? You also almost had every Ambu in the area come down on us. We didn't have time for a real fight. She's a tough one, Kazuya shrugged. One-on-one she might have had me going. Yeah, just grab her before anyone sees. Kazuya hauled the woman onto his shoulders, and they fled from the rooftop, Naruto leading them to a quiet area of the village. Kazuya dumped her against the wall, wrinkling his nose at the smell. Naruto shrugged. The people of Suna avoided this area precisely for that reason. They tied her up, Naruto slapping some anti-chakra seals on her before sitting back to keep watch. Come on, he didn't hit you that hard. He could hear Kazuya muttering beneath his breath as he tried to wake her up. Don't make me get my salts out. Naruto kept track of the signatures in the distance. None of them were coming close, so they had some time. He finally heard the woman stir a few minutes later. What the fuck? She groaned. Hey, come on, focus. Kazuya snapped his finger in his face. Her eyes came into focus, and Naruto watched her struggle in her bonds. Hey, what did you do to me? Her voice started to rise in her panic. I can't feel my chakra. Calm down, we just blocked it so you couldn't try anything. Kazuya stood and folded his arms. We just want to know why you blew up the offices, and more importantly, why you framed us for it. I'm not telling you fuck all. She spat at his feet. You'll just have to kill me. Kazuya rolled his eyes, turning to look at Naruto. Well, medical jutsu, poisons or seals? You're the one with the plans, Naruto shrugged. Kazuya turned back to look down on her. Well, we don't really need her to talk, he thought out loud. We just need proof that it wasn't us that blew it up. We can hand her over to the Suna nin once we track down her friends. They'll probably do a much better job with their T&I department. We just need a way of finding the others. Okay, is there anything on her? Naruto nodded in agreement. I'll be able to sense similar signatures, so as long we're in the same area we got that covered. It's just finding the area. You fuckers will never find anything. The woman spat. Kazuya stared at her, unimpressed. You aren't fooling anyone, he said with an eyebrow raised. You're alone, unarmed and immobilized around two enemy nin who you happen to frame for an international incident. I'd keep your mouth shut unless you have something useful to say. You need me alive, she hissed gleefully. But not in one piece. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Naruto had had enough. He rose to his feet, slapping a seal on her. She froze in position, her breathing halted. He then tagged her with another seal, and she vanished from view. She could just stay in the storage seal until it came time to hand her over to the authorities. Why the other seal before the storage one? Kazuya asked curiously. She would have died if I sent her straight into the storage seal, Naruto pointed out. There's no oxygen in a storage seal. The stasis seal will keep her as she was until we need her again. Now what's the plan? We know that they're after something, and I don't think this is going to end with just the offices. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been here. She would have run the minute it was all over. We just need to wait until they try again. Naruto was about to reply when a signature appeared on his periphery. Shit. We need to move. They lunged down the alleyway, just barely avoiding the large gust of wind hitting the ground where they had been. He looked up, spotting a girl in the near distance flying towards them on a large fan. They needed to leave before she got any closer. They walked calmly out into the street, merging with the traffic flow and blending in with the villagers. Naruto rested his head against the wall behind him. It was now early evening, the heat finally starting to die down and the sun casting a warm orange glow over the village streets. It had been roughly 8 or 9 hours since the office incident, and he was so tired. So far, the enemies that were framing them had also blown up part of the hospital, the academy, and even the Junin standby station. Most of the attacks had been avoided by the local shinobi, but he had heard there had been casualties at the hospital and academy bombings. These people were good, whoever they were. Not many shinobi could sneak up on the Junin station. These people had also worn his and Kazuya's faces throughout the ordeal. They didn't stick around long, but it was always enough time for some of the Sunanin to identify their faces and headbands. Their own civilian disguises were still holding up, but the Suna shinobi were getting more aggressive and closer each time. They had already had to avoid the fangirl and some puppet boy several times today. The increased frequency of bombings had helped them figure out what the goal was. The places that were attacked were tactically important to the shinobi of Suna, and as a result were all the more painful when hit. Not only that, but the fact they were disguised as Konoha shinobi added an extra layer of hurt. Naruto had been listening to the growing anger and resentment towards Konoha for most of the day. Kazuya had pointed out that was probably the goal, to disrupt the peace treaty with Konoha and potentially trigger a war. They probably hadn't even cared which Konoha shinobi they used. He and Kazuya had just been the unlucky ones assigned the mission. Kazuya sat beside him, white cloth covering most of his face, while he kept an eye on the large dome housing the Kazekage office. He had figured out that the only place left of tactically significance was the Kazekage. If Konoha shinobi attacked the leader of Suna, there would be no going back. Suna would never forgive that. So here they sat, in an alleyway in the line of sight of the office, waiting for the enemy to make their next move. Kazuya? Naruto surged to his feet as he felt that strange chakra incoming above them. He channeled chakra to his legs and feet, racing towards the Kazekage office. His friend followed closely behind him as he raced up the side of one of the buildings. As he leapt into the air, falling towards the roof, he spotted a copy of himself launching projectiles towards the large dome. Cursing, he pulled out his own kunai and flung them. He almost sighed in relief as his kunai hit the enemies, deflecting them away from their target. The explosive kunai hit some of the neighboring buildings, but Naruto couldn't focus on that. Futen, Repusho! He clapped his hands together, and a burst of wind flew towards the enemies. The pair dug their feet in, holding up their arms as they avoided being blown over. Kazuya flung several senbon in the wake of the gale, and as they landed, it was enough to disrupt their henge. Naruto grinned viciously as it revealed 2 men dressed similarly to the woman. Black bandanas with a belt styled like a tail, although these guys were in blue and green. He didn't see them for long as they threw down smoke bombs, obscuring them from view. He could feel their signatures on the roof, so they weren't running. They were up to something. He recalled his Chunin exam and grabbed Kazuya. Futon, Gofu Boheki. He flung out his arms, releasing the wind around them to form a wall around them. He pushed it out as he felt something hit the wall. The whole thing ignited as he shoved it as far from them as possible. It dissipated and he quickly followed it up. Futon, Daitopa? He blew away the smoke to reveal the 2 enemies once again. Both were sweating profusely, one sunk to their knees. Looks like the poison is doing its job, Kazuya muttered beside him. Naruto geared up to finish this when he felt two other signatures below, climbing towards them. There's more. Shit! Kazuya cursed as he whipped through hand seals. Get behind me. Katon. Kyuka no Jutsu. A sheer red sphere surrounded them, much like his wind barrier just moments ago. Kazuya kept it up as Naruto sensed the two new signatures join up with the other two. More smoke filled the roof, and Naruto heard the same sound of something hitting the barrier as earlier. Was this a regular technique for them? Lay down a smoke screen and send something unseen to attack? Unlike before, the thing latched on and Naruto could feel the chakra leach from the shield to inside whatever this thing was. Kazuya? He warned. I know. I can feel it draining the technique. The thing suddenly spiked with energy and Naruto snatched his water bottles, dumping them out. Suiton, Mizu no Yoroi. He made sure to cover every inch of himself and Kazuya with the liquid as the thing exploded. He had to close his eyes briefly against the flash, and felt some of his water armor evaporated from the intense heat. It was over quickly, and he opened his eyes, his exposed skin feeling like it was sunburnt. He glared over at the two still standing, Kazuya's poison having taken out the other two. They were on the brink of unconsciousness, and he could feel their chakra flickering weakly. He hoped his friend had used the coma poison and not the death poison. They still needed these guys to prove Konoha's innocence. How is your henge still intact? The large man in red watched them warily. You're supposed to be just Chunin, the one in yellow yelled indignantly. There's no way you should be able to take us down. We're Junin. We're the Nakizaru. We will not be taken down by two teenage Chunin. I hate to point this out to you, but you're down to 2 members out of 5, Kazuya said, not sorry at all. Plus the Suna Shinobi are here, Naruto pointed out gleefully. Wah! The man was cut off by a massive fan swinging into the back of his head as the girl flew down from above. The other was tied up in chakra strings as the boy held the man in place, the girl coming over to incapacitate him. She pointed the fan at them, and Naruto immediately raised his hands in surrender. You are not civilians, she said with her eyes narrowed. Drop the disguise. Okay. But when we do, you have to know that we aren't the enemy, Kazuya quickly replied. Konoha has not attacked you. The peace treaty still stands. Naruto pulled out the storage scroll and pushed some chakra into it, releasing the body of the woman. She's still alive, he said, laying her body down in front of them. That seal on her arm is a stasis seal. Just take it off and she'll wake up. Kazuya had unwrapped the cloth from his head by this point, and Naruto could feel the Ambu around him build up their chakra. We didn't do any of this, he shouted, hands back in the air. These guys called themselves the Nokizaru. They are the ones blowing up all these buildings. We think they did it to destabilize Suna and Konoha's relationship. We just happen to be the scapegoats. The girl was silent for a moment, taking in the 5 unconscious bodies. We stopped them from attacking the Kazekage, Kazuya added. Tamari, they might be telling the truth, the boy spoke up, his face almost unreadable beneath all the purple makeup. We know the Nakazaru are mercenaries, and these guys match the description. Konoha don't have a reason to attack Suna. She looked over to the boy and nodded. You two aren't going anywhere until we figure this out, she finally relented. We will cooperate however you need us to, Kazuya replied, the relief audible. We want to get to the bottom of this as much as you do. Whoever did this also made an enemy of Konoha today. Naruto peeled the seal off his arm from beneath his sleeve and felt the henge fall, revealing his male form. He was still in the beige dress, but the black dye had mostly faded from his hair, washed out by the water armor. Kazuya was looking at him, amused. You know, not as much as you think changes with that seal. Naruto was about to reply when a massive signature appeared within his range. He barely had time to warn the others when a wall of sand swept in from their right. The Suna nin managed to jump out of the way, but they only managed to grab 2 of the enemy nin. The other 2 nin were dragged over to the edge of the roof, where a boy Ryo's age stood on top of a cloud of sand. Naruto's eyes widened, his grip on the woman almost slipping as he properly took in the boy's chakra. He raised the 2 Nokizaru nin into the air, their faces slowly being covered by sand, his outstretched hand clenched into a fist. Sabaku Soso, Blood spurted out the tiny cracks in the sand coffin, and Naruto swallowed as he felt their chakra abruptly vanish. He stared into the murderous green gaze of the Jinchuriki, finding nothing but anger and pain and bloodlust. Your deaths will prove my existence. Seikenton, gender switch. Henjei, transformation technique. Suiton, Shigure, water release, drizzle. Roshon release, Gofo. Great wind protective wall. Dai Toppa, wind release, great breakthrough. Karan Kyuka no Jutsu, fire release flame sphere technique. Suiton Mizuno Yoroi, water release, water armor. Sabakuso sand waterfall funeral. Chapter 22, Release the Beast, Gaara. Tamari called out despite the terror plastered all over her face. Please stop, we need them alive. The boy dropped the mangled, bloody corpses to the roof beneath them. For a split second, Naruto thought he would listen to the girl, but as another wave of sand began to rise, he knew it was futile. There was nothing about the Jinchuriki that suggested he was willing to listen. There was only the desire to destroy. His heart twisted in his chest as he tried to think of what could have caused the kid to be this way. He couldn't be older than Ryo. As the wave of sand rose above their heads, Naruto flung the woman's unconscious body behind him to Kazuya. His teammate barely caught her as Naruto rushed forward. Futon, Goreto Hariken Shirudo. He held out his hands, trying to make sure he got everyone within the dome of wind. His dress twisted around his legs as the high-speed gale swirled around them. The wave of sand crashed against the shield, and Naruto gritted his teeth. The kid was strong. He felt his shield start to weaken as the sand bashed against it, the granules whirling around them, carried by the wind. He tried to think. This Gaara wanted their deaths, and he didn't seem to care if he got the Sunanin in the process. They had to keep what was left of the Nokizaru alive to clear Konoha's name. Maybe if he gave Gaara a target, someone to fight, he would forget about them. He clearly thought him and Kazuya were free game. Kazuya, make sure the Nokizaru are safe, he yelled behind him. I'll lead this guy away, so make sure they're secure. We can't afford to lose them. Kazuya's reply was lost in the sound of the gale. Naruto released the shield the moment Gaara took a second to gather more sand. He took a deep breath. Photon! Dangan! He blew out harshly, launching several small bullets of compressed air towards the Jinchuriki. Gaara threw up his own shield composed of sand, and the air bullets burst against it, barely leaving a scratch. Naruto took the opportunity and began to run, launching himself to the next rooftop. He glanced back to see Gaara glaring at him, and he jumped, spinning in the empty space between the buildings. Suiten, Suishoha! He concentrated on the sparse water particles in the air around him, using his chakra to gather some around his hands. He launched it towards Gaara, who again brought up his sand to block his attack. Unlike the Futon Jutsu, the Suiten soaked into the sand, slowing it down. He landed on the next roof, rolling backwards to his feet to continue running. He could hear Gaara finally begin to follow him. Now just to survive until he could think up the next part of the plan. He hopped between the buildings, frantically dodging the sand. He launched himself to the side as a claw made of sand smashed into the roof, leaving a large hole. He flung himself to the next rooftop, the volume of sand growing with each passing minute. Naruto ducked as a spike almost stabbed him, catching the bottom of the dress instead. He knew Gaara must be controlling it, but it almost seemed like the sand was alive, like it had a mind of its own. Suna Shuriken! Fuck! Naruto yelled as he danced around the projectiles, accumulating more tears in his outfit. It might not have been his best idea to provoke and fight a Jinchuriki who could control sand in Suna, a desert with very little water. He could, as a defense. He leapt for the next roof, but a wave of sand knocked him off balance. He just missed the ledge, and his heart soared into his throat as he began to fall. He looked down into the sea of sand below him. All he could think of was the blood from those mercenaries dripping from the sand coffin. He formed the ram seal, desperately hoping it would work, despite having so little practice. Futon, Atsugai? He continued to fall towards the sand as it surged up to meet him. He pushed more chakra into the technique. Finally, he stopped falling as he slammed into something solid, knocking the breath out of him. He hauled himself up, eyes widening as he took in the empty air beneath him. He adjusted his footing on the invisible platform, the increased pressure supporting his weight. It wasn't the intended use for this technique, but he'd take whatever he could get right now. He looked up to see Gaara staring down at him, his face tight with anger. Naruto maintained the ram seal as he created another platform and threw himself onto it. The second was a bit shaky, but it kept him away from the sand, which was enough for him. He finally got back to the roof, but before he could escape, walls of sand rose up in each direction. Naruto turned to face Gaara, planting his feet firmly. The other redhead came to rest on the roof, the sand whirling around him. He noticed that the sand around Gaara had faint blue veins running through it, but he didn't have time to look at it properly. There was a much bigger problem. He couldn't help but stare as a massive sand limb hung by the boy's side, going up into his shoulder. He switched his gaze to Gaara's face as what looked like an ear began to protrude from the side of his head. "You will prove my existence," Gaara growled, fury burning in his eyes. "Mother demands your blood." "What do you mean, mother?" Naruto asked before he had to dodge another swipe. "Gaara, I don't want to hurt you." "Lies," he roared. "You will be killed by me. I will not cease to exist." Gaara swung his giant limb at him again, and Naruto cursed, flashing through seals. "Suiton, Mizu Shuriken!" There wasn't enough water around him to drench Gaara like he wanted to, but it still made a difference. Gaara's sand arm became claggy in places, and as the Sunanin tried to move it, it was sluggish. Naruto saw his chance. "Shunshin!" He reappeared right behind Gaara and barely dodged the tail that had formed. He pulled out a seal, reaching forward through a gap to slap it on the kid's tail. The chakra suppression seal halted the sand in its tracks, but he could feel the seal being overloaded. He had to act fast. He tore another seal from the storage space in his dress and dodged to the opposite side of the monstrous arm, thwacking the seal on Gaara's forehead. The sand was slower than before, but he had underestimated the defense. He tore back his arm, blood dripping as the skin was ripped off by the sand. He leapt back, nursing the injury as he waited for Gaara to drop. He was very lucky that sand hadn't managed to grab him completely. When the boy didn't drop, Naruto took a step back. Something was wrong. His knockout seal never took this long to put someone to sleep. Gaara stood with his eyes closed, sand still swirling around him. "Thanks for releasing me, kid." A voice suddenly came from the sand around him. "I'll make sure you die super quick before I kill the rest of this pathetic village." "What?" Naruto stared in horror. I didn't release you." "Sure you did." The sand around him dove towards Gaara, adding to the sand appendages he already had. "You knocked out my container, so I've taken over his body for a bit. Might as well have some fun killing off pests until he wakes up." "You shouldn't be able to do that," Naruto spluttered, frozen in place. "Your seal." "The humans who wrote out my seal were an insult to the art of Fuinjutsu," the tailed beast huffed. "It was bad enough they trapped the great Shukaku within weak humans, but to do a shoddy job of it? One more reason to kill them all." Naruto took several more steps back as the shape began to become clear. A massive sand tenuki sat before him, still growing bigger as it absorbed the sand around them. Soon enough, Naruto heard the building begin to crack, and he dove for the next rooftop. He turned over onto his back, propped up by his elbows, so he could see what was happening. The tailed beast roared as the building beneath it finally gave way. Naruto just stared, his mouth agape. The building vanished underneath Shukaku's bulk, and as he slapped his tail down, a neighboring building was also flattened. Gaara was poking out the top of his forehead, and his massive tail was taller than any of the buildings in Suna. The tailed beast towered over them, the red light of the setting sun turning his black and yellow hide to gold. This was bad. This was really, really bad. He may not have anything to do with the bombings, but Suna could definitely blame him for this. If there was a village left, he had no idea that Shukaku would be released when Gaara fell asleep. No Jinchuriki seal should work like that. Naruto couldn't help but agree with the one tail. It was very shoddy workmanship. This could work in his favor. All he had to do to get rid of Shukaku was wake Gaara up. So he just needed to tear off his seal from the boy's forehead. Easier said than done. Shukaku turned his golden eyes towards him. "Now, you first." Naruto scrambled to his feet, forming hand seals through the pain. He wished he had storage seals on him. He stored water in a few of them for Suton Jutsu, but he had hidden them with his mission gear when they changed clothes. He could just barely fit a few of his seals in the dress, and he was grateful he had. Suiton, Suiben. He held the water in his hands, battering away the tendrils of sand that stabbed towards him. The sand flopped to the ground under its new weight, but it was quickly replaced by new sand. I'm not like my container, Shikaku laughed. I have access to all my chakra. You can't win against me, human, Naruto agreed. He leapt up into the air, using his air walking technique to stay afloat. Sand quickly covered the ground he had just been standing on. He glanced up to see the speck of red on Shikaku's brow. He didn't need to win, just get there. He held the ram seal as he launched himself forward, reinforcing his legs to get more distance. He winced at the amount of chakra he was losing as he jumped from platform to platform, getting faster and faster at forming them each time. Futon, Renkudan. Naruto's eyes widened as he registered the name of the jutsu. He cancelled his own technique and slammed feet first into the surface of the tailed beast's leg. He immediately began channeling chakra to his feet as he clung to the surface. Shikaku released his attack, and Naruto's stomach dropped as strong gales whipped around him, almost tearing him off. Once the smoke and sand had dissipated, he looked out and saw the destruction. All the roofs of the buildings had been torn off in one straight line, from Shikaku to the village border. He had never imagined the sand-walking technique would come in handy like this. Ignoring the dizziness as his chakra supply depleted, he ran up the side of the tanuki towards his head. You're fast, little human, but not fast enough. Shikaku lifted his leg and slammed it back down, disrupting Naruto's footing and demolishing another building. He clung desperately to the loose surface, trying not to fall to his death. He didn't have the chakra to make another platform. He pushed the dregs of his chakra into his legs once more and made one final leap. He tried not to cry in relief as he landed on Shikaku's neck. The tailed beast roared in fury, trying to bat him off but not quite able to reach him. Naruto crawled forward on his elbows towards the stationary body of Gaara. Finally coming up to him, he ripped the sleeping seal off and sighed in relief as Gaara opened his eyes. The relief was short-lived as he abruptly remembered that there was nothing holding the sand together beneath them. He reached out to hug Gaara to him as they fell with the rest of sand, making sure to protect the boy's head. He would not have Shikaku coming back if Gaara was knocked out. The landing wasn't as hard as he thought, as there was so much sand that it provided a nice cushion for them. They slid slowly towards the ground, and as Gaara began to move, Naruto slapped a paralysis seal on him. "Oh no, you don't," he muttered, exhausted. "I don't have the chakra for another fight." He just lay there for a moment, staring into the darkening blue sky. He was so tired. His dress was ruined. He wished he had some trousers on as the desert night was turning cold rapidly. He wished he could just sleep for a month. "How?" Naruto looked over to the other redhead. "How are you so strong?" "I have people to protect," Naruto grinned warily. "Why?" Naruto paused to think about it. "I don't actually know," he admitted. "It's what I've always done. I want to be there. I want to help, because I know I can make their lives easier. That's my reason for existing. To be there for my precious people, however they need me." He turned to continue staring up at the sky. "Why do you need to kill to exist?" "I need to kill them before they kill me," Gaara replied. "I'm a relic of the past. They just want to disappear. They've tried to cease my existence, so I need to stop them." Naruto swallowed at the implication in the boy's words. Sosuna had made a Jinchuriki, and had then tried to kill him off. No wonder the kid felt he had to fight to live. So what do I have in this life? Why do I continue to exist? I am alone, so I need to look out for my own survival. "I'm so sorry, Gaara." He sat up. "That should have never happened to you." The kid just stared at him in confusion. "My little brother is like you," he continued. "His name's Rio, and he has the QB sealed inside of him. He was treated horribly for it, still is sometimes, and no one except me and a friend would go near him for the first few years of his life. I tried to be there, but I could always tell how lonely he was." He smiled. "Things are different now. He has so many people that treasure him that sometimes I don't think I'm needed anymore. I look after him, but I'm an authority figure in his life. not really a friend. He turned his smile to Gaara. I'd like to be your friend, though. I'm sure Rio would too. Gaara looked like he didn't know how to process that information. You don't have to fight alone anymore, Naruto insisted. There are people who will love and accept you for who you are. You just have to let them in. Your life will be so much more with other people in it. Love is the strongest reason to live you could ever find. Love. Naruto looked up as he sensed the chakra signatures approaching. Temari, Kazuya, and the boy with purple face paint ran up to them, shock written over all of their faces. Temari stared down at Gaara. You beat Gaara, she said faintly. You beat Gaara when Shikaku was out. I wouldn't have had to deal with Shikaku if you people could do decent fuinjutsu, Naruto grumbled, in no mood for this nonsense. Naruto, you survived a fight with a tailed beast, Kazuya insisted. When did you get so good at futon? He shrugged, too tired to get into it. When he'd realized how much training he was missing out on when he was swallowed by his other duties, it had annoyed him. So he'd managed to squeeze in 2 nights a week to practice his ninjutsu. He didn't sleep, but he would have plenty of time to rest when he was dead. Life right now was too valuable to waste sleeping. He threw up his hands tiredly shortly before the Anbu arrived and didn't resist as they arrested him. Gaara watched him with wide, green eyes, and Naruto made the effort to smile at him. I'm going to help you, Gaara. Things are going to be different from now on. Kazuya stood in front of the Kazekage, trying not to fidget. He glanced over at his friend as he stood beside him, his entire body screaming exhaustion. He had managed to wrap up his arm and some of the bigger scratches on him. He was also pretty sure the redhead had sprained his ankle. He hadn't had time to heal any of it before they were carted off to see the village leader. The 4th Kazekage was very different from their own Hokage. The man was in his 40s, with dark eyes and auburn hair that was several shades darker than Naruto's. He was dressed in a green version of Hokage-sama's robe, with the kanji for wind etched into his hat. Kazuya felt an uncomfortable crawling feeling as the man's stern gaze swept over them, completely unreadable. It didn't help that they were still in their dirty civilian garb. The beige shirt and pants were covered in sand, and Naruto's dress was much worse, with tears and blood streaked all over it. The fact that Naruto had beaten a Biju while in a dress still hadn't sunk in. He was sure they would laugh about it one day. We have questioned the remaining Nokizaru and have confirmed that the bombings around Suna were their doing. The Kazekage began. They are agents of a member of the court who desired to tear down the alliance between our villages. Suna thanks you for your aid in capturing the perpetrators and preserving our relationship with Konoha. It was our pleasure, Kazekage-sama. Kazuya bowed deeply. So technically you owe us, right? All eyes snapped to Naruto. I mean, Suna does. Kazuya tried to hold in his panic. What was he doing? The Kazekage stared unrelenting into Naruto's equally determined blue eyes. What do you want? I want to fix Gaara's seal. The Kazekage narrowed his eyes. It does not require fixing. I'm a qualified fuinjutsu specialist, Naruto answered back. I'm telling you it does. And what would you change? The Kazekage wore a calculating expression. I'd let him sleep, Naruto folded his arms. I'd make sure he wouldn't hear Shikaku unless he chose it for himself. So you're looking to make my weapon less effective? Kazuya instinctively held Naruto's shoulder, anchoring him in his place. As much as he hated the Kazekage's wording, they had just gotten their charges dropped. They didn't need new ones. He's not a weapon, Naruto snarled. He's a child and deserves to be treated like one. You have no right to dictate how my son should and should not be treated. Naruto froze. He's your son? Yes, the Kazekage drawled. You tried to kill your son for your mistakes? Kazuya slapped a hand over Naruto's mouth, but the words were out. You forget your place. The Kazekage thundered, rising to his feet. You will not speak to me that way, or I will have you arrested after all. I'm so sorry, Kazekage-sama. Kazuya bowed again, dragging Naruto down with him. He just blurts things out. He's so passionate about fuinjutsu. Naruto, why don't you tell him the benefits of the new seal? Kazuya bore his eyes into Naruto's, trying to get the message across. Naruto finally slumped and nodded beneath Kazuya's hand. He let go and they straightened. Kazekage, Kazuya elbowed him. Sama. This wouldn't only benefit Gaara, but Suna too. There would no longer be a risk of accidentally releasing Shukaku. Gaara would be able to choose how much of his chakra he wanted to release and use. He could choose if he wanted to hear the Biju's voice. He would also retain all his control over sand. There's no way Suna would lose out. A happier, more stable Gaara could only be a good thing. And you believe yourself capable of producing this seal? Would there not be risk of releasing the beast when you change them over? I don't have to make a new seal, Naruto shrugged. I can just modify the one he has. The Kazekage was silent for a long moment. Very well, he relented. You will modify the boy's seal and then you will leave Suna immediately. Do not come back. Kazuya started shoving Naruto towards the door before he could open his mouth and cause them more trouble. Of course, Kazekage-sama. Naruto stared down at the seal noted down on the large piece of parchment before him. No wonder the kid was suffering so much. This was horrible. This was worse than his work back when he was a genin, and that was saying something. Several trees, coffee tables, training grounds, bathtubs, offices, and his eyebrows could attest to that. He drew another couple of lines and sat back to think it over. He couldn't make it as secure as Ryo's, but he was confident he could at least give Gaara more power over himself. He was trying to perfect the seal on paper before he went anywhere near Gaara. Last thing he needed was to break the trust he had with the kid. The anger was still simmering in his gut from the meeting with the Kazekage the day before. If he could steal Gaara and give him all the love and respect he deserved, he would do it in a heartbeat. Gaara was a product of his environment, and Naruto hated it. Just thinking about Ryo being treated like that was enough to make him want to break something. He could fix Shikaku's bad influence over the kid, but something needed to change in the people around him too. That couldn't be fixed with fuinjutsu. His gaze flickered over to the edges of the training ground. There were no trees like back home, but enough sand dunes to hide the ambu that lurked around. They had not left his vicinity since he left the Kazekage's office. A large signature sat nearby and Naruto smiled. Gaara had also been following him since then. His chakra was much calmer than it had been the day before. He looked back down as two familiar signatures landed beside him. It was quiet for a moment, as he presumed that they were trying to find something to say. "Where's the dress?" Naruto glanced up to see Temari hit the boy over the head. "Apparently it's not my color," he replied, amused. He had managed to get his black mission gear back, and he swore he would never leave his scrolls behind again. He might have to tattoo some on his skin so he would never be without them. His right arm was a bit bare compared to his left anyway, so it would fill the space. "We just want to say thank you and we're sorry," said Temari. "I know Tucson can be a bit stiff, so I figured someone should say it properly." "The Kazekage's your father?" Naruto turned in place to face them directly. "Yeah," the boy shrugged. "Temari's the oldest, then me, then Gaara. And you are?" "Kankuro." Naruto considered them for a long moment. "You know, I have a little brother." He turned back to the parchment. "His name is Norio, although he hates being called that. He always says it sounds like someone trying to tell him no, Ryo. It doesn't really mean that, but whatever makes him happy, you know?" The Sunanin were quiet, so Naruto continued. "He's a Jinchuriki too. I can't tell you which because of village secrecy and protocol and whatnot, but he's just like Gaara. A baby with the power of a god sealed inside him through no fault of his own." He finally looked up into Temari's wide, shocked green eyes. "So that's why I'm a bit confused about why Gaara turned out like this," he said, deliberately keeping his tone casual. "I mean, part of it has been Shukaku telling him goodness knows what nonsense in his head, and of course the insomnia. But that doesn't account for everything. There should have been someone there for him. If there was, I doubt any of this would have happened." Kankuro opened and closed his mouth like a fish, while Temari spoke. "Gaara has always been able to look after himself," she faltered. "He was always threatening to kill us or hurt us, so we figured it was better to stay out of his way. He can protect himself. We tried to be there if he ever needed us, but he never did. Gaara was a sweet kid, but we were told to stay away from him." Kankuro seemed to have recovered his bearings. "Before we knew it, Shukaku had warped him into this merciless killing thing, and we were just trying not to die. Shikaku didn't warp him, Naruto pointed out. Shikaku just took advantage of the hurt and the pain and the distrust and used it for his own ends. He has a lot to do with it, but Gaara was let down long before that. Of course a kid is going to be threatened when people that are supposed to protect him either try to kill him or ignore him. You just don't understand what it was like. Kankuro yelled down at him. My brother was in the same position as Gaara, he started to say, but Temari interrupted. Did your brother ever try to kill you? Or destroy parts of your village when he got mad? Or wrapped you in sand until you couldn't breathe? Her breathing was fast and harsh, her eyes glassy. No, he replied softly. I didn't let him have the chance. I raised him from the day he was born, took care of him when everyone else left. Rio would never do that, because he loves me and the village. He's never had a reason to hate anyone. It sounds like it was so easy for you, snapped Kankuro. Naruto glared at the boy but stayed seated. Nothing in my life has been easy. He shot back. Raising a kid when I was just a kid myself is the hardest thing I have ever done, but I am his brother, his only living family. It's my job to look out for him. Did the village hate him as much as yours hate Gaara? Yes. Did they try to attack him? Yes. Was he ignored? Did people run away from him? Did kids spread awful rumors? Yes. None of that mattered because I was there. I shielded him from as much of it as I could, and as a result he was able to see the good in the village. He was able to find people that care about him. He sighed heavily. Look, there's no changing the past. We could sit here forever blaming one thing or another for what happened to Gaara. I personally blame your father. What I wanted to ask is what you are going to do now. If you're going to be better. Better how? Temari let out her own sigh, flopping to the ground beside him. We can't do anything without him threatening us. He doesn't want our help. Do you think we never wanted to try? I love Gaara, he's family, but you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. I think he wanted help, but didn't trust that he would get it. He mumbled quietly beneath his breath. He continued a bit louder. He just needs someone to be there, to make the effort to be there no matter what. To know that someone is going to care if he disappears. I know, and I want to do that, Temari insisted. I just don't know how. I can't tell you, Naruto shrugged. You guys have to figure out for yourself how you're going to start mending the bonds between you. How old are you? Kankuro suddenly asked. Naruto threw him a strange look at the abrupt change of topic. 14. You're my age, Temari breathed out faintly. Naruto glanced at her in confusion. Yes? How do you sound so old when you're only my age? Temari frowned. How did you beat Gaara? I don't know, probably comes with raising 2 kids. He waved a hand dismissively, looking back at the seal. I don't really think about it, I just handle things as they come. He missed the silent exchange between the Sand siblings. You're wine-natured, right? Temari spoke up. That's my main one, yeah? Naruto picked up his brush and added a seal to the top left corner. Water is my secondary, although I'm getting better at it. I can teach you some jutsu before you go, Temari offered, as a proper thanks for what you're doing for Gaara. Unless you're into puppets or poison, I'm not much use, added Kankuro. Naruto turned back to consider them. Kazuya is into poisons, he said. He's at the hotel we were assigned. Kankuro stood and nodded, walking off in that direction. I have to finish this, but we can start after. He smiled at Temari. If you want to stick around? Sure, she smiled back, settling into place next to him as he continued modifying the seal. How do you feel? Naruto watched Gaara carefully as the boy sat up, one hand going to touch the new seal on his abdomen. The black ink stood out against the pale skin, and as Naruto looked over it again he was satisfied with the result. Quiet, Gaara mumbled quietly. Can you move your sand for me? Gaara moved his hand out so it hovered over the side of the table. Sand immediately curled up through the air, circling his outstretched limb. Naruto sighed in relief. Okay, so you still have your sand. That's good, he grinned. Now we just need you to sleep so we can see if it really worked. Gaara turned to him, and although there was no expression on his face, Naruto could see the hesitation in his eyes. It's going to be okay, Gaara. He reached forward and clasped his shoulder gently, squeezing it in comfort. I'm going to be right here. If that old tanuki gets out, you know I can put him back. I'm not going to leave you. Gaara stared down at the hand on his shoulder before he nodded. He lay back down on the table, and Naruto took out the knockout seal from before. He placed it on Gaara's forehead and activated it, watching green eyes slip closed. It was a tense few seconds as he waited to see if Shikaku got out. He was well prepared this time as he kept one hand on the seal, ready to rip it off at the first sign of anything going wrong. He had storage seals filled with water from the nearby oasis for his Suten jutsu. Nothing happened, and Naruto allowed the tension to leave his body. He carefully deactivated the seal and lifted it from the boy's brow. Gaara's eyes slowly flickered open, and Naruto smiled down at him. "It worked, Gaara," he said softly. "You're free." The boy sat up once again and stared down at his hands. Naruto's own eyes widened as he watched Gaara's fill with tears. Hey, it's okay, Gaara. This is a good thing." "I know," Gaara said solemnly. "I do not know why my eyes are leaking." Naruto laughed, and he brought Gaara into a hug, holding him there until he felt the kid relax. He had figured out the sand only lashed out and shielded him if Gaara felt any ill intentions or danger towards himself. It was there to protect him. If Gaara felt comfortable and safe, then the sand would remain dormant. Naruto only wanted the best for Gaara, so the sand hadn't touched him since the fight with Shikaku. He hoped this helped him realize that not everyone was out to hurt him. He felt the Ambu flare their chakra at him in warning. It was time to go. The Kazekage had been abundantly clear that they were to vacate the village at the first opportunity. He was already dreading debrief. This mission had been a shit show. "Walk with me to the front gate?" Gaara quickly nodded and jumped off the table, shrugging on the beige shirt that Naruto handed him. They left the training ground as Naruto sunk the table back into the earth. He opted to take the rooftops to avoid the civilians, and as they ran along quietly, "You know, I sometimes think about how Ryo would have been without me to look after him. Would he still be the same sociable, loud, happy kid, or would he have gone down a darker path?" Gaara looked over at him in surprise. "Who is Gaara without Shikaku?" Naruto mused. "I mean, your lives are always going to be intertwined with the other. That's just part of being a Jinchuriki. But can you say that you have something in your life that is entirely Gaara? Something that Shikaku hasn't influenced nor convinced you to do?" "No. You're going to have to come and visit Konoha sometime," he continued casually. "I know Ryo would love to meet someone else like him, and I'm sure Sasuke would love to train against that ultimate defense of yours. Maybe we can even find a hobby for you, something you're passionate about." "Would I be welcome in your village?" Gaara replied, his voice soft. He'd noticed since he had beaten Gaara several days before, the boy was quiet. He was reserved and showed little expression. It wasn't a surprise, considering the lack of social interaction he'd had so far in his short life, but Naruto had a feeling that, even when he opened up, Gaara would still be on the quiet side. It was a change from back home where he was constantly surrounded by loud and colorful personalities. Even Sasuke, the calmest of the bunch, could get extremely vocal when he was wound up. He loved that bright and busy atmosphere, but it was hard to realize how tired he was until he stepped away from that. "Of course," Naruto smiled brightly. "You can stay with me. Everyone in my home knows about Ryo, and they love him to bits. Even Sasuke has been suckered into friendship. They wouldn't care about your tenant." Gaara just nodded once, and they continued on, finally coming to the front gate. Kazuya was waiting for him alongside Temari and Kankuro. "How'd it go?" Kazuya called out as they landed in the street and began walking towards them. "It worked." Temari took a step forward. "Is it true? Gaara can't hear Shikaku anymore? He won't be released if Gaara falls asleep?" "Ask him yourself," Naruto replied as he came to a stop in front of the group, pushing Gaara forward gently. She turned to her brother, obviously still nervous around him. Naruto knew that wouldn't be fixed in the few days he had been there, but maybe it could be a start. "Gaara? Are you okay?" Gaara stared back at her impassively, but Naruto could see his own nerves hidden behind his eyes. "I am fine. Shikaku is no longer in my head." A wide smile broke out on Temari's face. "That's great," she said sincerely. "I'm so happy for you, Gaara." "Me too," said Kankuro, although he was more subdued than Temari. Naruto clapped his hands where the atmosphere could become awkward. "So I guess we better get going," he announced. The Kazakage might actually arrest us if we stay a second longer than necessary. I think he's wrong, Tamari spoke up. You are the best thing to happen to this family in a long time. If it were up to me, you'd always be welcome here. Naruto lifted his hand to shake hers. I appreciate that. He proceeded to shake Kankuro's but pulled Gaara in for a proper hug. Just remember, he whispered into his ear. There are people out there who care about your existence. You have nothing to be worried about. You'll always exist to us. Just try to let your siblings show you that too. He pulled back and ruffled Gaara's hair. The kid's face twitching into a frown as he reached up and tried to put it back in place. So not that I don't love the dry, hot, rough vibe you guys have got going on, but I have sand in places I didn't even know sand could reach, so we should go now. Kazuya waved a hand, slowly dragging Naruto out the front gate and ignoring the guards. We'll see you next time. Naruto threw one last smile and waved before he turned and followed Kazuya out of Suna. They continued in silence until Naruto couldn't feel the village anymore. So that was officially the worst mission we have ever done, said Kazuya. Even the land of rivers wasn't that bad. We didn't get arrested or practically banned from the country. It wasn't that bad. Naruto rolled his eyes fondly as Kazuya whipped round to stare at him. Naruto, we got framed for terrorism and almost caused an international incident. We somehow managed to save the Kazakage and arrest the culprits, but we then destroyed a good part of Suna, let loose a tailed beast, and got arrested by the Anbu. I'm pretty sure you still caused an international incident with the Kazakage. And now the most dangerous kid in the country, Suna's Jinchuriki, follows you around like a lost puppy. Hey, I got some new futonjutsu out of it, and you got some poison recipes. We also managed to help a hurting kid. Not a bad mission in my book. Kazuya just face-palmed. Hiruzen tapped his desk as he took in the two boys before him. Naruto and Kazuya both looked worse for wear, and they had good reason to be from the mission report they just gave. Konoha had received many messenger hawks from Suna over the past week, and it had not painted a pretty picture. So you had quite the mission? They remained quiet, and Hiruzen continued. You somehow managed to cause and resolve an international incident on the same day. Rasadono has also expressed that he does not wish for you two to be sent to his village for future missions. He caught the glance that Kazuya threw to the younger Chunin. Are there any more countries you wish to cause an international incident with? You have two of the four major villages, Suna and Kumo. If he were caught wind of your identity, Naruto, you would almost have the full set. Respectfully, Hokage-sama, Naruto gritted out. I didn't know they were incidents at the time. Hiruzen sighed heavily. We are going to get to the bottom of the identity of the client, and you two will not be involved. I will arrange to collaborate with Suna to discover the full details of what went wrong and how we can prevent the same happening again. In the meantime, I feel that you should see this. He placed two bingo books near the edge of the table, and Kazuya stepped forward to grab them, chucking one to Naruto. The pair opened it, and Kazuya's eyes widened. We're in the bingo book? You are B rank in the bingo book. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, Naruto mumbled under his breath. We annoyed a lot of people at the Chunin exams. In light of this development and how you handled the events in Suna, you have received a field promotion to Tokubetsu Junin. Kazuya, in the field of medical jutsu and poisons, and Naruto, in the field of fuinjutsu and sensing. You will report to the registry after this meeting to complete the paperwork. He could read the shock all over their faces. We're the same rank as Genma-sensei? Kazuya blurted out. Naruto opened his mouth to say something, but he hesitated, closing his mouth and remaining silent. Hiruzen felt a sting in his heart. Naruto was no closer to forgiving him for the lies after the Uchiha massacre. He had to accept that their relationship will never be like it was. Naruto hadn't called him Gigi in over 3 years. He had Ryo, who occasionally dropped by to talk and spend time with him, and Konohamaru was growing up fast, but it still hurt. You both have grown over the past 4 years since your last promotion, he said. You have risen through your respective departments and have built a strong reputation in Konoha. I have no doubt that you will be ready for the Junin exams in only a few short years. This incident with Suna was only a catalyst for you. I was considering your promotion before this. Thank you so much, Hokage-sama. Kazuya bowed deeply, trying to hold back his emotions. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Naruto said respectfully, his bow slightly shallower. For Hari missions, you will no longer report to the desk first. Hiruzen sat back in his chair. You will report to Nara Shikaku, the Junin commander. He will dispatch you on missions and put you to work in your new capacity. However, you will still keep your jobs within the village. Your pay will reflect your new rank. He waved a hand towards the door. You may go. The pair turned towards the entrance and walked through the door. Hiruzen filled his pipe and lit it, taking a deep breath of smoke. They might be some of the best shinobi Konoha would ever produce, if they could stop stumbling into incidents with other villages. Futon, Gereto Hurricane Shirdo, Wind Release, Great Hurricane Shield. Dangan, Wind Release, Air Bullets. Suden Suishoha, Water Release, Water Palm Wave. Suna Shuriken, Sand Shuriken. Atsu Wind Release, Pressure Damage. Suden Mizu Shuriken, Water Release, Water Shuriken. Shunshin Body Flicker Technique. Suibin, Water Release, Water Whip. Renkuden, Wind Release, Drilling Air Bullets. Chapter 23, Expectation versus Reality. Ryo opened the top drawer, carefully rummaging around the assortment of kunai, combs, and the occasional pair of socks. Nissan could really do with organizing his room. He was pretty sure those things weren't meant to be found in one drawer. If he had learned one thing about Nissan during his search, it was that Nissan had no system for anything. He had no idea how his brother found anything in here. It was a simple layout. As he entered the room, the orange futon was in the far left corner, and it faced the old chest of drawers he was now searching. A wide window was set in the back wall, with the wooden wardrobe covering it slightly as it was shoved into the far right corner. Nissan's desk was in the corner opposite, and Ryo had no idea how he had managed to fit a small bookshelf just beside it. Both the desk and the bookshelf were overflowing with scrolls, books, ink brushes, and various mugs. Ryo couldn't identify the seals covering the walls, but it was almost as if he could see Nissan's thought process. Not a single item of furniture matched, and Ryo knew that it was all second-hand. Nissan always said it was boring to have matching furniture, that it was better to have a quirky home so it matched their family. Ryo believed him, and he had to admit he loved the colorful patchwork that was their flat. It really did make the place more comfortable, but Ryo had also realized the more prominent reason. They simply didn't have the money. He had never noticed it growing up since he spent so little time around other kids outside of Kiba. It was only when he started the academy he began to realize. He himself had never been without, but Nissan and Kazumi had. Neither had kimonos or even new clothes. Ryo couldn't recall either of them buying something new for themselves outside of shinobi equipment. Nothing went to waste, or was thrown away either. Ryo was pretty sure his old clothes had been sewn into something else by Kazumi. They never went out for dinner unless it was a special event or the occasional ramen. It was especially noticeable now since he had made friends with most of the clan kids. What are you doing? Ryo hit his hand off the drawer as he slammed it shut, whirling around to stare at the door. Sasuke leaned against the doorframe. He raised his eyebrow pointedly. Nothing, Ryo answered automatically, even while knowing he looked guilty as hell. Right, Sasuke tilted his head. I suppose Naruto knows you're searching his room then. He won't think anything of it when I mention it at dinner. Don't, Ryo blurted out. He sighed as he glared at the other boy. Fine, I was trying to find the notes Kazumi made for Nissan while they were at the academy. I need them for the graduation exam. Kazuya said we shouldn't use those notes because we should be passing on our own merit, said Sasuke, and Ryo didn't bother hiding his eye roll. Plus he made them after Naruto already passed, so even he had to pass the exams on his own. Easy for you to say, Ryo pouted. You're at the top of the class. I still can't do bunshin and the exam is only a few weeks away. You're not that bad. It was Sasuke's turn to roll his eyes. Other than bunshin, you're nowhere near the bottom. You're above the Inuzuka, Nara, and the Akimichi. Yeah, and if they ask me to do bunshin in the exam, which they will because they know I'm bad at it, I fail no matter what. Ryo sighed heavily, pushing past Sasuke and flopping onto the worn sofa. I can't fail this exam, Sasuke, he said warily. My brother graduated early, was a chunin at 10, and made tokubetsu junin before he turned 15. Kazumi did all of that before he was 17. I'm already behind. Sasuke came over and sat on the other chair. I just can't disappoint them, he admitted quietly. I can't be the weakest in the family. You know they don't think of you that way, said Sasuke equally as quietly. Naruto adores you and Kazuya would drop everything if you asked him to. But I know I am. Ryo sat up in a fit of emotion. Misan has always been so protective over me. They told me about my parents and the Kyuubi, but I know there's other stuff they've been keeping from me. They think I can't handle the hard stuff. And I'm going to prove them right when I fail the Jininin graduation exam 2 years after they made Chunin. Ryo panted harshly as he sunk back into the cushions. There were a few moments of silence before Sasuke spoke. You're not the only one, you know. Ryo looked over to him. Itachi made Chunin at 10 too, Sasuke continued. Except he was made an Anbu captain at 13. I haven't even graduated from the academy, and yet he was Anbu at my age. How am I supposed to beat that? Sasuke turned, and Ryo's heart twisted at the pain in his eyes. At least your brother is still around. He's still here to help you. Itachi tried to kill me after killing my whole family. Now I have to kill him, but I have no idea how I'm supposed to do that. Ryo let the awkward silence hover over them as he tried to find the right words to say. Sasuke didn't talk about what happened to his family, but when he did, it made Ryo feel sick. He couldn't imagine Misan ever doing what Itachi did. I'll help, he finally said. We help each other surpass our brothers. I know Nisan and I are different from you and Itachi, but we want the same thing, to be stronger than them. Ryo knew that was an oversimplification of things, but he hoped Sasuke understood what he was trying to say. The uchiha are mine to avenge, said Sasuke firmly. And you'll avenge them, Ryo agreed. You'll be the one to kill him, but nobody said you couldn't have help getting you to that level. Sasuke pondered his words for a moment, and Ryo hoped he hadn't said the wrong thing. He couldn't understand Sasuke. He had never known his parents, so he had never really lost anyone before. Misan had always been there with Kazumi, so he had no idea how to relate to the Uchiha. You're more like Naruto than you seem to think. Sasuke threw him a small grin and Ryo relaxed. I hope so, he joked. It would make passing this exam a lot easier. I'll help you with Bunshin if you spar with me, Sasuke offered. You also have to go over history with me because there's no way I'm losing to a fangirl. Ryo laughed at the disgusted face Sasuke made. Sakura is super clever, he cackled. Never know, she might lure you in with those big brains one day. No fucking way is that ever happening, Sasuke stated vehemently. I will never date a girl, they are awful. Maybe you just haven't met a non-annoying one, Ryo suggested, still cackling. Hinata is taken, isn't she? It was Ryo's turn to splutter as Sasuke chuckled. You don't know what you're talking about, he pointed his finger at Sasuke's face, bright red. She's just a friend, she's good at math so she helps me sometimes. You will not mention her to Nisan and especially Kazumi. Sasuke just smirked. I mean it. Ryo yelled, his face only turning a brighter red. You mean what? Ryo whipped around and spotted Nisan in the doorway. Nothing. Sasuke let out a rare laugh, and Ryo could only pretend to glare at him, no heat behind the expression. Naruto brushed a stray strand of hair behind his ear as he pointed out something on the mission scroll. We can't do that while things are still shaky with Suna, he said firmly. While it was proved Konoha was framed, the Kazekage would still be unhappy if we sent our nin to the land of Wind Court. They think we're stealing enough missions as it is. Last thing we want to alert them that we're carrying out missions in the capital itself. This isn't an externally funded mission, Shikaku replied. No progress has been made to find the noble behind Takayama that caused that whole mess. If they've found anything, Suna isn't talking. It's been almost a year, Naruto sighed, standing up straight. We've tied it to Takayama, who then pointed the finger at another village, who were probably somewhat involved, but not enough to do anything about it. We know for a fact it was someone in the Wind Daimyo's court who blackmailed Takayama into it. And we know there were messages exchanged with that village. Otogakure is very busy for such a new village, Shikaku mused, although Naruto could see the sharp glint in his eyes as he gazed down at the mission documents. He hadn't been sure what to make of the Junin commander at first. They'd met once before, on Ryo's first day at the academy, and Naruto knew his son, Shikamaru, pretty well by this point. At first, Naruto thought he was the double of the kid. Personality and appearance, barring the 2 long scars that ran down his face. As he got to know the clan head, Shikaku was indeed as relaxed and laid back as any Nara Naruto had worked with. However, he was much stronger, with an iron will and a ruthless intelligence that Naruto hated having pointed towards himself. Since his promotion to Tokubetsu Junin last year, he had ended up working much more closely with the Nara than he had expected. He and Kazuya reported to the man to get their Hari missions, but that was the only interaction Kazuya had with Shikaku. Naruto, on the other hand, since he was one of the few Junin working at the desk, liaised with the man for A-rank and B-rank missions. Naruto spent as much time in Shikaku's offices as he did his own desk. He was barely assigned front desk duty anymore. He was too busy organizing the missions themselves. It was sometimes strange to see familiar names on the mission reports, or to write down Kakashi's or Gai's, or even Genma-sensei's name to assign their missions. It was a lot of responsibility, to know he was sending them into delicate and dangerous situations, to know that one day he might send them on a mission they don't come back from. He had settled into his new role within weeks, and now months later, he had a level of knowledge about the village's resources and capabilities that he wasn't sure a Tokubetsu Junin was meant to have. "How troublesome," Shikaku grumbled, his hand going up to stroke his goatee. "Everything except shogi is troublesome to you," Naruto replied, amused. "Speaking of shogi, you still owe me a match from New Year." Shikaku smirked at him, and Naruto grimaced. He had never played the game before working with Shikaku, and he still wasn't sure he wanted to. The Nara clan were obsessed with the game, and Shikaku tried to drag him down to the compound to play a few rounds with him every few weeks. He had managed to avoid this fate so far, but he was running out of excuses. "You must be able to find a better player than me," Naruto insisted. "I don't even know how to play. Why not try the guys at the Junin standby station? Asuma could probably give you at least a few hours' entertainment." "There's not many your age that could last that long against me," Shikaku continued to smirk. "If you keep playing, you could even beat me in another 10 years. I'm only trying to help you practice." Naruto rolled his eyes. Help him practice his ass. Shikaku just worked closely enough with Naruto that he knew when the redhead was free. He could also engineer some free time to play since he was Naruto's direct superior. He only wanted to play more shogi. "I won't be around in 10 years, remember?" Naruto sighed as Shikaku's grin dropped. "All the more reason to make the most of it while you can," he said, his tone somber. Shikaku had been added to the very small circle of people that knew the truth about his condition not long into Naruto's new job. He should have known better than to try to hide something from a Nara. They were the most perceptive bastards in Konoha. The truth had come to light one evening when Naruto had been trying to stifle his cough as he and Shikaku worked overtime. He knew he should have really gone home, but the mission had been due to leave the next day, and there had been so many last-minute details. He had managed the dizziness by remaining seated the whole time, but when he proceeded to cover his handkerchief in blood splatter after a particularly violent coughing fit, Shikaku had demanded the truth. It was either tell the Nara or get dragged to the hospital, and Naruto wanted to avoid that outcome as much as possible. Shikaku hadn't been happy, but he'd agreed to keep it to himself. Only Shikaku and Yakushi-sensei knew how bad it's gotten. He'd kept Kazuya and Genma-sensei in the dark so far. "Yoshino still wants you round for dinner, so might as well kill 2 birds with 1 kunai," Shikaku continued, his smirk returning if a bit subdued. "Don't make me issue it as an official clan invitation." Fine, I promise I'll come round one of these days," Naruto finally relented. "After the graduation exam." Shikaku nodded. "I'll hold you to that." He dropped his gaze down to Naruto's outfit. "Though I suggest wearing at least a shirt for the occasion. If the other clan members see those seals, they'll try and marry you into the family then and there." Naruto tried not to let the horror show too obviously on his face. He liked the Naras. He was still half convinced that Kazuya was related to them, but he had no intention of marrying anybody. He looked down at his clothes, frowning slightly. After Suna, he realized he couldn't tattoo storage seals onto his right arm, as he had no way to activate them. He couldn't use chakra in his left hand, so it wasn't logistically possible. He just wouldn't be able to reach. His torso, on the other hand, was free game. He had scrawled storage seals across his ribs, 3 on each side, and 3 on his stomach, a large one above, and 2 smaller ones below, forming a triangle around his belly button. He had added swirls and flowing lines to fill the spaces between the seals, most purely decorative, with the odd protection and enhancement thrown in. To the untrained eye, it looked like one massive complicated seal, rather than several relatively simple smaller ones. It had taken days to get the design and hours to ink into his skin. This had then introduced the problem of accessibility. In a fight, he wanted to be able to reach them quickly and easily, which was hard to do when they were covered by fabric. Kazuya had offered a solution, although Naruto knew it had been a joke at the time. His regular outfit consisted of his black trousers, the ends now wrapped in black bandages, leading into his black shinobi sandals. His black brace was hugging his arm, the strap across his chest and looping around his back. His beloved orange jacket was hanging on the back of his chair. What Kazuya had jokingly suggested that he was now wearing was a black crop top. It was slightly loose against his chest with short sleeves and ended just before his new tattoo began. It had taken some getting used to, but Naruto loved it. Okay, but I can't promise it won't be orange. Shikaku rolled his eyes at Naruto's unrepentant grin. Ryo took a deep breath as he placed his brush down, Iruka-sensei announcing the end of the written portion of the exam. He was pretty confident on the history, even the geography and shinobi rules, but he wasn't too sure on his maths. He didn't think he ever would be, no matter how long he spent studying. He stood, following the rest of the class outside to the targets outside. He remained beside Sasuke as they were at the end due to their surnames. Most of his friends did pretty well. Kiba landed a score of 70-100, and Shikamaru and Choji ended up in the mid-60s. Ryo threw enthusiastic thumbs up to Hinata as she scored 89-100. He was less enthusiastic, but no less pleased when Sasuke sauntered back with the highest score of 98-100. He finally stepped forward for his turn and tried not to yell in triumph as he was awarded a score of 86-100, his personal best. Taijutsu was next, and Ryo grinned widely as he was pitted against Sakura. The girl was smart but barely trained. Even in class, she always complained about getting sweaty and dirty. She didn't want to be anything less than perfect for Sasuke-kun. Ryo always enjoyed the look on Sasuke's face every time she said that. His friend shot him a jealous look, already having won his fight against Shino. Shikamaru looked about ready to surrender as he eyed Ino, the girl fully willing and able to deck him. Kiba had gotten lucky, easily beating the civilian boy he was matched with. He took his place in the ring, his grin only widening as the pink-haired girl looked back at him nervously. She'd had many, many horrible things to say about him over the years, and now finally he would be able to pay some of it back. Some part of him knew that it was the other civilian girls who had influenced Sakura, as she had actually been quite shy in first year. Things started to go downhill when the Sasuke fan club had been formed. "You may begin." At Iruka-sensei's words, Ryo lunged forward, Sakura barely able to scramble back to throw up a basic block. Ryo purposefully allowed his punch to be blocked, and he danced backwards to give her some space. She got into a shaky version of the basic academy stance, and Ryo laughed. One issue with not seeking extra taijutsu instruction was that they ended up with only the most basic forms that they had been taught to fall back on. Ryo had been sparring with Nisan, Kazuni, and several others since he joined the academy. Nisan was particularly adamant that Ryo needed to learn to improvise and expand on what he'd already learned. He was pretty sure Sakura had never been ambushed with glitter nor had her room booby-trapped for training, and it showed. "Quit playing around, Ryo," Kiba called out. "I want to see Shikamaru get pulverized by Ino." Ryo rolled his eyes as Sakura glared at the Inuzuka in offense. Iruka turned to tell the boy off, and Ryo moved. He darted forward again, and Sakura put up the same block. He swung his leg, kicking her on the side of her left arm and knocking her off balance. He lunged, planting his fist through the gap in her defense before she could react. His punch landed square on her stomach. She wheezed and coughed as Ryo pulled his fist back and swung again. He hit her cheek, and she went stumbling back, landing on her backside outside of the ring. Haruno Sakura is out of bounds. Uzumaki Norio wins. Ryo smiled. He had totally made up for his maths with this. He bounced back to his group of friends. You're horrible. You know that. He turned to see Ino helping Sakura up, the pink-haired girl trying not to cry. You didn't have to do that to her. Ino continued hotly. You can't treat girls like that. Ryo sighed. He had no patience for this argument. What, like bandits and enemy nin are going to be gentle with her, he scoffed. Real ninja don't care if you're a boy or a girl. You should be able to fight and win against anyone. He wasn't about to start treating girls like they were delicate. He knew Tsumeba-chan and Hana-ni-chan. They were way stronger than a lot of the guys he knew. Still, you could have given her a chance to fight and show her skills, Ino insisted, although some of the heat had left her words. Then maybe she should have trained more instead of worrying about her hair, Ryo replied with zero remorse. He turned back around and continued forward, standing beside Choji. The last few fights passed quickly. The only surprise was Shikamaru, who lasted much longer than Ryo would have thought. Ryo had no issues with the genjutsu portion. He had always found them easy to break. The time finally came for the ninjutsu potion, and the dread just grew with every kid that came out the room, with and without a headband. Sasuke emerged, his headband tied firmly around his forehead, and Ryo stood, trying to keep calm. He entered the room and faced Iruka-sensei and Mizuki-sensei. Uzumaki Norio, change into a family member or someone you admire. Ryo formed the hand signs and disappeared in a puff of smoke. His big brother, Naruto, appeared in his place, and he put his hands on his hips, beaming proudly. This was easy. It covered both the criteria, and he knew every detail by heart. He released the jutsu, going back to his original form. Now perform Bunshin. You must form at least 2 functioning clones. His heart dropped. He remained frozen for a long moment, and Iruka looked at him expectantly. Any time now, Ryo. He slowly formed the hand seals, squeezing his eyes shut as he hoped and wished that it would work just this once. He heard the 2 puffs of smoke appearing, and he opened his eyes. He tried to stop the tears from spilling over as he stared at the pale, sickly faces of the deformed clones. I'm sorry, Ryo, but you have failed the graduation exam, said Iruka-sensei firmly. You will join the new class in 2 weeks to repeat your final year. You may take the graduation exam again next year. Ryo was frozen as he continued staring at the clones. Iruka-sensei stood with Mizuki-sensei, but he hesitated before coming over to Ryo. I'm sorry, Ryo, he said more genuinely. If it wasn't for Bunshin, you would have passed with flying colors. That only served to make him feel worse. He finally released the jutsu as Iruka left the room. He didn't notice when Mizuki-sensei appeared next to him. There's a secret way to pass the exam, he revealed. Iruka didn't mention it because he thinks it's too difficult, but I believe in you. Are you willing to do it? Ryo nodded immediately. He didn't even think about it. Anything was better than going out there and facing his family without a headband. Mizuki-sensei had been weird with him throughout the year, but right now he was his lifeline. Okay, come with me out the back, Mizuki-sensei said, clasping Ryo's shoulder firmly. I'll tell you what you need to do. Naruto raced through the door of the office, taking in the complete anarchy as people dashed around yelling. He grabbed Hijiri as he passed. What the hell is going on? He demanded. Why is the village alarm system going off? Ryo stole the forbidden scroll. Hijiri rushed out. No one can find him. It felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath him. Ryo had done what? Was that where he had gone? He and Kazuya had met Sasuke outside the academy, and he had been so proud of him. He had promised to keep training the boy, and had pulled him in for a tight hug. He had almost been brought to proud and happy tears when Sasuke had hugged him back. He was still so reserved and preferred to avoid physical contact, but he had opened up so much in 3.5 years. They had been waiting around for Ryo when the alarm had gone off. Kazuya had sped off to the hospital, and Naruto had sent Sasuke home to watch Momo, who was bound to be panicking at the loud, wailing noise. He could have easily sensed for Ryo while waiting outside, but he'd purposely tried to restrict his range to as small a radius as possible. He didn't want to feel how Ryo was doing. He wanted Ryo to tell him himself. That appears to have been a mistake, as he immediately expanded his range, easily covering most of Konoha by this point. "I say we capture and punish the demon brat," Iwana spoke up vehemently. "We should have killed it years ago before it started causing problems like this." "Shut the fuck up, Iwana," Naruto snapped back. Iwana Akame was a part-time academy teacher in his 30s, who spent the rest of his time at the desk. Naruto hated the man with a burning passion that he was sure was mutual. He had it out for Ryo and was extremely vocal about it. Naruto had clashed with him on many occasions over the years, and he was grateful that his promotion took him mostly out of the office. "Just because you took in that thing and raised it doesn't mean it changed its nature," Iwana spat. The old argument familiar. "I said shut up, Chunin Iwana," Naruto sneered, emphasizing his rank. Iwana's mouth clicked shut as he tried to murder Naruto with his eye. He was sure the man would have burned a hole through his eye patch if he still had the other one. Naruto turned away from him, half his attention searching Konoha and the rest assessing the personnel he had. "Okay, I'll find him and bring him back. I have the best chance of finding him through my sensing abilities. Kana, stop that alarm. Everyone else get out on the streets, and keep people calm and security airtight. We don't want anyone taking advantage of the alarm. Hijiri, Tachibana, Akito, you three go down to the vault the scroll was kept in. The security team should be down there already. Assess what future changes and missions we might need to assign so this doesn't happen again." There was a chorus of, "Yes, sirs," before Iwana spoke up again. "Oh yeah, send yourself to pick the brat up," he sneered. "Like you're gonna do anything about it, you're too soft." "You have your assignment," Naruto said, his mind elsewhere as he finally located Ryo in the forest. "I will bring both Norio and the scroll back to the Hokage for judgment." He quickly formed the tiger seal and appeared in the forest, which had fallen into darkness as the evening began. He searched for Ryo's signature once again and found it quickly, frowning at the familiar signature nearby. He ran to Ryo's position, startling the younger boy as he studied the open scroll. "Norio!" The blonde looked up in fear. It was never good when Naruto used his proper name. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in?" He strode forward angrily as Ryo rolled up the scroll and scrambled to his feet. "But me-san, I was just doing the special part of the exam." Ryo frantically blurted out. "What special part?" Naruto stopped advancing. Ryo hesitated, and Naruto flared his chakra in warning. "Norio, tell me now." I failed the exam," Ryo finally admitted. "I can't do Bunshin. Mizuki-sensei said if I learned a technique off this scroll then he'd pass me." "Mizuki said what?" Naruto repeated before the signature finally revealed itself. "I told the demon brat that if he stole the forbidden scroll and learned something off it, he'd pass." Mizuki smirked. "Not that he'd be able to learn anything, of course. I just needed a scapegoat, and who better than the container of the QB?" Naruto's anger burned brighter, and he whipped a seal out of his pocket, forming familiar hand seals. "Shunshin!" He appeared right next to the Chunin, and the man barely had a chance to respond before Naruto slapped his seal on him. There was a bright burst of lightning, and Mizuki dropped like a stone, Naruto barely catching him before he fell out of the tree. He took off the massive shuriken from the man's back and stored it away into one of his storage seals. He hiked him over his shoulder and walked down the trunk. Ryo's eyes were blown wide with shock as he stared at him. "You beat Sensei so easily," he whispered, as Naruto stuck a sleeping seal onto Mizuki. Last thing he needed was him waking up to cause more trouble. "I should hope so," Naruto said, still holding on to the anger. "He's not a very good Chunin." He dumped Mizuki onto the ground and folded his arms, staring down at Ryo. "What on earth possessed you to steal that scroll?" he demanded. "You stole from the Hokage, from Konoha. Did you even think twice? Did it not occur to you to speak to someone before you did it? I understand he was your teacher and you trusted him, but I thought I had taught you better than that." Ryo started hesitantly. "I had to pass the graduation exam. I had to become a genin. I couldn't fail, and when Mizuki-sensei told me I could pass, Ryo, it's okay that you failed. I don't care about that." Naruto threw up his hands. I care that you hid something so simple to the point you committed treason. Well, it's easy for you to say. Ryo screamed back. You don't know what it's like, being the weakest. You were a chunin at my age. Of course it matters that I failed. You're a junin, yet I can't do one simple fucking jutsu to become a genin. I'm always being left behind. There was a moment of silence as Naruto stared at his brother, the younger boy out of breath from his rant. I couldn't disappoint you, Nisan, Ryo continued quietly. Being an Uzumaki is hard enough to live up to as it is. Naruto sat down heavily and gestured for Ryo to do the same. His little brother took a seat, refusing to look at him. Ryo, I was dead last at the academy. Wide, violet eyes turned to him in surprise. Naruto held up a hand to stem the tide of questions until he could finish. Yes, I graduated at 7, but it was by the skin of my teeth. I got so much help from Kazuya and Hana that people thought they carried me through. Which they did in a way. I was the weakest in my genin team. It's only after I became chunin that my ninjutsu and taijutsu improved enough to get me on the same level. He sighed. I couldn't do bunshin at the academy either. I was just really lucky that it wasn't one they asked for. It wasn't for another 3 years after I graduated that I finally mastered it. If I had known you had trouble with it, I could have helped. He looked sadly over to Ryo. I don't look down on you or think you can't do the same things I can, but I don't think you should end up like me either. I've only ever wanted the best for you. You know? To give you everything I never had. To give you a bit of time before you got thrown into the world. I got so much help, so when I can do the same for others, I want to repay that debt. I didn't mean to make you feel like you had something to prove. He reached over to ruffle Ryo's hair and was relieved when the younger boy let him. No one is perfect, and no one certainly got strong overnight. Oh, Ryo mumbled. Please just promise me you'll ask for help next time you're struggling with something. Naruto sighed. It doesn't even have to be me. Kakashi, Kazuya, even Tsume would be more than happy to help you. I promise, Nisan. Okay. Naruto hauled himself to his feet and grabbed Mizuki. Let's go return the scroll and speak to the Hokage. Ryo followed him quietly, hugging the forbidden scroll to his chest. Ryo stared at the classroom door in front of him. Last night had been a mess. Nisan had gotten him an audience with the Hokage, but left it to him to explain what happened. Gigi had been very understanding, and when he showed the old man what technique he learned from the scroll, he was more than happy to pass him. Kaj Bunshin had finally let him make a decent clone, and even Nisan had choked a bit when he had proved he could do the technique. He just couldn't believe he'd been tricked so easily. He'd found out that Mizuki was being interrogated as a traitor shortly before he'd been sworn to silence on the matter. Sasuke had found out what happened, though, practically living with him, and had only called him a dobe. Ryo couldn't really argue that. Kazumi had been disappointed, but nowhere near as angry as Nisan had been. Nisan had congratulated him on his graduation before promptly grounding him. Ryo wasn't allowed out for anything but genin team activities for a month, and he was designated to do all chores except cooking for that duration. He had never really been grounded before, but had seen it plenty of times with Kiba. He thought the punishment was pretty light for what he'd done, but he figured Nisan knew how horrible he was feeling about it all anyway. Nisan had left early that morning for work, and although he didn't say anything before he left, Ryo knew it was because of him in some way. Kazumi's had sat him down, much like Nisan had to talk to him. He pointed out that Nisan had 3 years on him, and Kazumi had 5. Of course, they were going to be further ahead. Nisan did nothing but work, train, and look after him and Sasuke. Deep down, Ryo knew he didn't train as much as Nisan, even though he had far more free time. Even though he now knew that Nisan hadn't always been that strong, he still felt out of reach somehow. Nisan had always been the image of the strongest shinobi to him, even over Kashi and Gigi. As he reached for the door, Kazumi's final words floated around his head. Sometimes the wrong choices lead to the right places. It didn't make him feel much better, but it did help a little. He pulled the door open and stepped inside, trying to keep his head high. Nobody knew what happened last night, so no one knew he had failed. The Hokage himself had allowed his graduation, so he had no reason to believe he didn't belong here. He desperately tried to believe that. Kiba waved at him, but there were no free seats around him. He slid in next to Sasuke, who had gone ahead of him earlier. If you look any more guilty, people are going to guess Dobe. He shot a glare at Sasuke. Quit calling me that already. I know I fucked up. Some more people began arriving, and Ryo perked up at the sight of Hinata. Before he could wave at her, Sakura stomped into his view. Move, she demanded. I wanted to sit next to Sasuke-kun. Maybe you should have gotten here earlier, Ryo sniped, leaning back further in his chair and propping his feet up. So fuck off. He waved his hand in a shooing motion and watched in delight as she stormed off towards the back of the class. She was still sporting a bruise on her cheek, although it was obvious she had tried to cover it up with makeup. There was nothing like annoying the shit out of fangirls to cheer him up. Sasuke covered him with the monster and demon crowd, and he helped out with the fangirls. It was a good system. Iruka-sensei finally entered the room and clapped his hands to get their attention. I just wanted to say again, congratulations to all of you here for passing the exam. His gaze lingered over Ryo for a short moment. On a sadder note, Mizuki will no longer be a teacher at this academy, although I'm sure he's happy for you too. Ryo snorted, but managed to disguise it as a cough. Sure he was. Mizuki was totally just leaving instead of being held in a cell somewhere. Now on to team assignments. Team 1 will be Nozaru Izumi, Tanada Daichi, and Kaneyama Shoto. Team 2? Ryo drowned out the names as he didn't associate with any of them. They didn't like him very much. He was sure it was because of some garbage they'd been fed about the Kyuubi. The first time he heard the name of a friend was his own team. Team 7 is Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Norio, and Haruno Sakura. Your Junin-sensei is Hatake Kakashi. Yes. Ryo covered his mouth as everyone turned to stare at him. He mumbled out a sorry, but he was too excited to care. Team 8 will be Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata, and Aburame Shino. Your Junin-sensei will be Yuhi Kurenai. His sensei was Kashi. He was on a team with Sasuke. Not even having Sakura on his team could dampen his mood. He exchanged an excited look with Kiba. This was better than he could have hoped. Team 9 is still active in the field, so Team 10 will be Nara Shikamaru, Akimichi Choji, and Yamanaka Ino. Your Junin-sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. Ryo laughed as he heard Shikamaru's head thump to his desk. He was in Ryo's position, one friend, one fangirl, except he didn't know his sensei. Ryo had known his godfather since birth, which meant as each team was led out of the room, Ryo relaxed further into his chair. Soon enough, half an hour had passed. Everyone was gone, and it was only Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura left. Where is he? Sakura huffed. Kashi is late to everything. Ryo spoke up, engrossed in a game of catch the kunai with Sasuke. He had moved to the other side of the room and was passing it back and forth. We've probably got another hour or so before he turns up. I'm hurt, Ryo, that you would think so little of me. Ryo startled, launching the kunai at the voice. Kashi caught it, spinning the tool around on his finger. Good reflexes, he pocketed the kunai. Come on, up to the roof. The man vanished before Ryo could demand answers, and as they reached the roof, the Junin was already leaning on the railing. Why are you here so early? Ryo asked, ignoring Sakura's indignant twite. He's late. Maybe I just wanted to meet my cute little Junin as soon as possible. Kashi smiled. Naruto threatened you, didn't he? Sasuke spoke up in an amused voice. The Junin froze, a sweat drop forming. Anyway, Kashi clapped his hands. Let's get to know each other. So we'll go around, state your names, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and dreams for the future. Ryo exchanged a smirk with Sasuke as they sat down on the steps facing their new Junin-sensei. Why don't you show us how it's done, sensei? Sakura asked sweetly, and Ryo rolled his eyes. Well, I'm Hatake Kakashi, and I don't feel like telling you my likes or dislikes. My hobbies? I have lots of hobbies. My dreams for the future? I've never really thought about it. There was a brief moment of silence. That was rubbish, Kashi. While Kashi proceeded to gasp dramatically, Sakura whipped round to glare at him. Ryo, you can't say that to our teacher. It's rude. Relax, Sakura. Ryo waved her off dismissively. I've known Kashi since I was born. She gaped at him before turning to confirm with Sasuke. I do not know him well, but we have met a few times before. The Uchiha shrugged. As Sakura processed the information, Kashi stopped acting silly and looked at Ryo. Though since I'm your Junin-sensei now, Ryo, you should really call me Kakashi-sensei. He clapped his hands once more. Now, we shall continue our introductions with Pinky there. Sakura appeared to get over her confusion quite quickly as she straightened her back. I'm Haruno Sakura, and I like. She kept taking glances at Sasuke. I mean who I like. Just get on with it. We all know you're obsessed with Sasuke? Ryo threw his hands up, exasperated. I don't like Ryo, she snapped. My hobbies are, she continued. The anger vanished and replaced by giggles. They're a secret. My dreams for the future are also a secret. She stared at Sasuke and the boy moved a few inches away from her. Ryo shrugged as Kashi glanced at him questioningly. Okay, Ryo, you're next. I'm Uzumaki Ryo, he began enthusiastically. I love my family, ramen, green and powerful jutsu. I don't like fangirls, ignorant people, or mushrooms. My hobbies are playing catch, walking my dog, and hanging out with my friends. My dream for the future is to become the Hokage. He glared at Sakura as the girl scoffed at him. Uchiha, you now. I'm Uchiha Sasuke, he stated calmly. I like tomatoes and training. I don't like fangirls or weak people. My hobbies are training and katon jutsu. My goal for the future is to avenge my clan and find out the truth about that night. His fists clenched tightly towards the end of his introduction. We've got an interesting bunch here, Kashi chirped. So tomorrow morning, you will meet me at Training Ground 7 for a survival exercise. The results will determine who makes Genin and who is sent back to the academy for remedial training. There are 27 graduates this year, which makes your chances about 66%. Wait, what? Ryo launched himself to his feet. No one said anything about an extra test. I thought we were Genin already, added Sakura hotly. This test is to weed out who will make it as a shinobi and who won't, Kashi explained nonchalantly. Now, you're free to go, but I expect you at the training ground at 5 a.m. sharp. I recommend skipping breakfast or you'll puke. He disappeared in a puff of smoke, and Ryo just stared at the place he had been in shock. He thought it was over. He passed the exam, he got his headband, he should be a Genin. Now it could all be taken away from him? Suddenly he was a bit less excited at having Kashi as his Junin-sensei. Chapter 24. They grow up so fast. Ryo couldn't suppress the yawn that emerged as he walked down the dirt track, Sasuke stretching his arms next to him. It was absurdly early. Even Nii-san had been asleep when they left. The village hadn't quite woken up yet, and it was strange to witness the quiet hush that fell over the village. He wasn't sure he liked it. He much preferred the village when it was busy and bright and loud. Ryo wanted to be a shinobi more than anything, but he couldn't help but hope there wouldn't be too many of these early starts. They came up to the training ground and he spotted the dash of pink against the green background. He felt Sasuke stiffen next to him as Sakura turned and waved. Good morning, Sasuke-kun, she yelled, breaking the peace of the morning. They walked closer and Ryo gave a sarcastic wave of his own. Well, hello to you too, Sakura, he drawled, grinning at the glare she shot at him. Sasuke remained silent as he stared off into the trees. Ryo was pretty sure he was trying to imagine himself far, far away from here. Sakura just gushed about how cool and stoic he was. Ryo had no idea how so much was getting lost in translation. Oh, here, Ryo shoved the bento he'd been carrying into her arms. Kazumi made this for you. His eldest brother had been working all sorts of weird shifts at the hospital, which meant the brunette had been bright-eyed and already sorting through paperwork of some kind, when Ryo had dragged himself out of his bed. It had been almost painful to be exposed to that much energy so early in the morning, and Ryo was almost completely sure that Kazumi had played it up to annoy him. It was exactly the sort of thing he'd do. He had tried to tell Kazumi about the no breakfast thing, but he had immediately dismissed it, already preparing the eggs. Kakashi-sensei said not to eat breakfast, Sakura frowned. Actually, he recommended that we skip breakfast, Ryo pointed out. Otherwise we'd puke, so I'm just going to take my chances. It wasn't actually an order or anything. Sakura turned her gaze to Sasuke. Do you eat breakfast, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke continued to stare into the distance until Ryo elbowed him. He sighed heavily and looked at her. Yes. Oh, Sakura stared down at the bento. I'm still not sure. I mean, I am on a diet. Sakura, I'm sure you'll burn off all those extra calories during Kashi's test. Ryo rolled his eyes. Besides, I don't think Kazumi is capable of making an unhealthy meal. That's Nissan's territory. Naruto can only make ramen. Sasuke raised his eyebrow pointedly. That's all you need, though, Ryo insisted. It's really not. Ryo noticed that Sakura had fallen quiet, and he turned to look at her. She was staring back and forth between him and Sasuke. He couldn't quite read the expression on her face. I didn't realize you two knew each other so well, she said carefully. Ryo threw her an incredulous look back. Sakura, we've been next-door neighbors for almost 4 years, he said slowly. Sasuke practically lives with me at this point. How did you not notice in the academy that we walked to school together pretty much every day? Sakura opened her mouth but closed it as no sound came out. We got picked up by the same people. Ryo sighed exasperatedly. You must have seen us together at the Rinne festival or something. I know you and your creepy fan club follow Sasuke around. She started defensively. I didn't think Sasuke-kun would actually hang around someone like you. What do you mean, someone like me? Ryo crossed his arms. I did pretty well at the academy. My history scores were way better than yours, so it's not like I'm not on the same level as you or something. She means she buys into that crap about you being a monster. Sasuke's voice was cold. Don't you? Sasuke-kun. For fuck's sake. Ryo pressed the heel of his hat into his eyes in frustration. Sakura, we're a team now. You have to get over whatever shit you've been told, otherwise this team is never going to work. Nissan always says that a Genin team is for life, not just a rank, but I am not going to put up with that garbage. I'll ask Kashi to swap you for someone else if it's going to be that much of a problem. Why me and not you? She frowned. Because you're the one with the irrational and dumb prejudice? Sasuke huffed, and Ryo shot him a grateful look. Sakura stuttered. It was what everyone was saying, Sasuke-kun. Maybe learn to think for yourself. Ryo turned to walk away. Sasuke followed him to the middle of the training, and they began their stretches. Ryo didn't look over to see what Sakura was doing or if she was eating the bento. He couldn't help but feel this team was already set up for failure. If one failed, they all failed, and right now, Ryo had zero confidence in his new teammate. Naruto stared down at the paper, the words starting to swim in front of him. He sighed, resting his head on his hand as he waited for the dizzy spell to pass. Today had to be the day he got a shift on front desk duty for the first time in months. Ryo and Sasuke had already left for their Genin test before he had woken up, and Kazuya had been and gone, leaving him an omelet, orange and rice for breakfast. He had ended up feeding most of it to Momo as his stomach churned. The idea of eating today just did not appeal to him at all. He was currently sustaining himself on ginger tea, and he wanted nothing more than to crawl back into bed until he felt less shitty. Naruto-sensei. His head snapped up at the voice, and he closed his eyes to stave off the intense wave of vertigo. Lee. Team 9 stood in front of the desk, looking like they had just finished their mission briefing. Lee was waving enthusiastically at him, and Tenten threw a wave of her own, much more subdued but no less sincere. Neji stood nearby, his arms folded and a bored expression on his face. Guy joined his pupil in his exuberant greeting. Naruto-kun, how are you on this most youthful day? Great, Guy-sensei, just great. Naruto gave a half-hearted grin. He stared blankly at them for a moment before something clicked. Oh, you and your team have to go for your annual medical this week, he recalled. It wasn't really his department that arranged them, but he had been helping out the registry lately, and it saved them sending a hawk to Guy later. We will head there right now. Guy presented 2 thumbs up. We shall ensure that we are in the springtime of our youth. I'm finished here for the day so I can walk with you, he smiled, rising to his feet. I'm heading that way anyway, just wait while I grab the paperwork. He nodded his goodbye to Kana as she took his place and popped into the offices next door. He grabbed the files for the hospital and made his way back to the desk, walking alongside Tenten as they left the building. He didn't particularly want to go to the hospital, as he was dodging a checkup of his own, but he had to deliver these forms, and he figured he could use the Genin team as a buffer. Naruto knew he shouldn't be avoiding it, especially since he was only getting worse. Today proved that. It was just he knew there was nothing Yakushi-sensei could do. There was nothing anyone could do, except maybe give him some painkillers and bed rest. His doctor had suggested steroids to help the inflammation caused by the coughing, but Naruto wasn't keen. He knew how to handle the symptoms. Adding medication to the mix might cause side effects that he didn't have time to deal with. At least he knew his body right now, even if it liked to make him miserable. There was actually a lot of overlap between the symptoms of each of his organs deteriorating, so it made it easier to deal with. It also made it harder to keep track of how each one was doing. He was sure he would get a full diagnosis if he actually went to his appointments, but he didn't need Yakushi-sensei to tell him it wasn't going well. "So how are you guys doing?" He began conversationally, pushing the dizziness to the back of his mind, with minor success. "I know you're doing more C ranks. Are you going to go for the Chunin exams this year?" "I hope so," Tenten sighed. "It sucked that we had to skip out last year, but we're ready now. We'll totally pass. We will show the other villages that we are in the springtime of youth," Lee announced. Naruto looked at Neji expectantly. He didn't know the Hyuga as well as the rest of his team. They had only met a few times over the past year when Naruto came by to help Tenten with her fuinjutsu. Neji was quiet like Sasuke, but there was anger beneath the surface and a weird insistence that everything they did had already been decided by fate. From what he knew of the main and branch families of the Hyuga clan, he could hardly blame the kid for his issues, but the fate comment never failed to annoy him. "If we are destined to pass, we will," he said tonelessly. "There is nothing we can do to change our fate, so we must accept it as it comes." "Right," Naruto drawls. "It's not like training can improve your odds or anything." He turned back to Tenten. "It's hard to believe it's already been a year." He smiled down at her. "Yeah, plus Rio graduated this year, right?" She laughed. "Yeah, he is sitting his Genin test as we speak. I remember ours," she groaned. "Just getting beaten at taijutsu for 2 hours. It was most invigorating," Lee chimed in. "Our youth was tested and we emerged from the other side in full bloom." "Lee!" Gai-sensei cried, and Naruto sighed as the spandex duo started on their usual production. "Gai-sensei!" Tears were streaming down Lee's face. "Lee! Gai-sensei! Lee! Oh look, the hospital!" Naruto abruptly interrupted as the sunset began to appear behind the pair. "Our destination." The duo stopped and Tenten leaned over, whispering a desperate thank you in his ear. Naruto grinned at her. "I understand," he whispered back. He was about to add something a bit louder when the dizziness came back full force. The world spun around him, and he blindly reached out, finding a solid surface to latch onto. He breathed slowly, trying to find his bearings. He should eat something. That might help. He could risk it. It was always worse on the day he skipped meals, but if he had a choice between vomiting and dizziness, he would go for the second any day. "Naruto-kun! Naruto-ni-san! Naruto-sensei!" He waved them off with his other hand, as he straightened. The world stopped spinning, but retained a sense of lightheadedness. He almost felt as if he was floating, but as Team 9 stared at him in concern, he tried to ground himself. "I'm fine," he said dismissively. "I just haven't eaten today. Once I get some ramen in me, I'll be good as gold." "Are you sure?" Tenten hovered over him. "That didn't seem like you were just skipping a meal." "I may have skipped a few," Naruto shrugged, not actually lying about that. "I've been working non-stop the past few weeks." Months, his brain helpfully filled in. "And I guess I haven't really stopped to breathe. I probably just need a day off or something." He chuckled nervously as the team seemed to buy it. "You should really take better care of yourself, Naruto-kun," Guy admonished. "You are in your springtime of youth. There is a lot you can do outside of work." "Yeah, I know." Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "It just gets away from me sometimes." He ushered them in the front entrance, dumping the documents with Sara as he retreated back out the door. "I'll see you guys later," he called out. "I'm gonna go grab some lunch now." As he exited the building, he headed in the direction of home, although he had no intention of eating. He would just have some more tea and work on the seals for the finance department. Maybe try and write seals directly on the coffee table rather than using sealing paper. He had been trying to develop that technique for ages, Plus, he could sit down in his own home with a blanket, hot cup of tea, and a fluffy dog. He wasn't sure he could relax more than that. He idly wondered how Ryo and Sasuke were getting on with their new teammate. They were due over for dinner that night, so Naruto had to make sure he was back to normal, or as close as he could get these days. He hadn't had to sit the Genin test himself, so he had no idea what to expect. He shrugged the thought away. He would find out tonight. If he knew Kakashi, though, they wouldn't be able to sit around and take it easy. "Where is he?" Ryo flopped to the ground. "This is ridiculous even for Kakashi." Sasuke grunted in agreement as he sat nearby, picking at blades of grass in boredom. They had stretched and warmed up, and when there had still been no sign of the Junin, they had settled on light sparring. After an hour of that, they had switched to their usual game of catch, Sakura watching them from the side nervously. Hour 4. Ryo had tried to squeeze in a quick nap, only to be rudely awoken by Sakura pestering Sasuke about a date. Now, hitting the 6th hour, Ryo was debating just going home and letting Kakashi find them later. He had lost his nickname privileges and Ryo's respect as an authority figure back around hour 5. Kakashi was late, Ryo knew that, but this was upsetting. He had thought his godfather would at least try and make an effort. He had been so excited to have him as his Junin sensei. He really had believed that the Junin would step up. It hurt to know that they weren't worth the effort. He understood being an hour late, but not this. Sasuke grunted beside him, eyes closed as he lay spread-eagled on the grass. Sakura had migrated closer to them over the past 6 hours, but she had been unusually quiet. She even joined them in their final round of stretching, although she still tried to con Sasuke into dating her. At least there hadn't been any of the typical hostility they shared in the academy. What he and Sasuke had said earlier seemed to be sinking in. "Good morning, my cute little Genin." Ryo sat up abruptly, glaring at the man as he waved cheerily at them. "What the fuck, Kakashi?" The Junin twitched as Ryo left off his usual nickname. Good. He wanted him to know that he was pissed at him. "You're late!" Sakura pointed an accusing finger at the man. "Sorry I'm late." Kakashi waved a hand dismissively. "A black cat crossed my path, so I had to go the long way." "Black cat, my ass." Ryo stood to face the Junin, dusting off his trousers. The three of them stood in a loose line as Kakashi pulled out an alarm clock, placing it on a nearby rock. "This alarm is set to go off at noon." He lifted 2 red bells from his belt and dangled them in front of them. Whoever possesses one of these bells by the time the alarm goes off becomes a Genin. Those without will be going back to the academy to redo their final year. He attached the bells back onto the belt, the short strings allowing the bells to jingle as Kakashi moved. "Anything goes. You have to come at me like you're going to kill me." "That won't be a problem," Ryo muttered beneath his breath as Sakura piped up. "But sensei, there are only 2 bells." "Good eye," Kakashi replied, still overly cheerful. "That's because only 2 of you can pass and become Genin. 1 of you will be going back." "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair. Welcome to being a ninja." Ryo kept quiet at this revelation, sharing a glance with Sasuke. That didn't sound right. Genin teams were always in a 3. Kakashi pulled out an orange book and began to read. "Those who don't get a bell will also be tied to a post and will miss out on a delicious lunch." Ryo narrowed his eyes, so that's why he didn't want them eating breakfast. Too bad he forgot to factor in Kazumi. "You may begin." Ryo flipped through the seals and swapped with a random branch, settling among the trees. Kakashi remained standing in the clearing, appearing to be engrossed in his book. Ryo had no idea what it was about, but Kakashi was banned from reading it in the flat. Nisan had burned his last copy. He really didn't think much of them if he wasn't even paying attention. Sasuke and Sakura had also vanished, and Ryo sniffed the air. He moved, hopping down to the ground and weaving his way between the trees. Spending so much time around the Inuzuka when he was younger had rubbed off on him. Tsumebachan always said he was one of them at heart. He shared their heightened senses, and Tsumebachan had even suggested that he could go into tracking. Nisan had theorized that housing the Kyuubi had also contributed to his sensitive sense of smell and hearing. He followed the familiar scent until he found Sasuke in a tree. The shorter boy was staring intently at Kakashi, completely still. Ryo climbed the trunk to settle in next to him, watching the Junin giggle at whatever he was reading. I don't remember Kakashi being like this when he visits you, Sasuke spoke up quietly. He's not, Ryo whispered. I don't know what's up with him. His godfather was so easygoing, always willing to listen to him and give him training tips. He always gave Ryo his full attention. They always had ramen when they went out. They always had a laugh. Ryo could talk to Kakashi about anything, and he knew that the Junin would listen and understand. It was sometimes easier to talk to him than Nii-san or Kazune. This whole act Kakashi was putting on was really throwing him off. Also, what's the deal with only 2 bells? Ryo continued. There are no 2-man Junin teams. Everyone knows that. Naruto and Kazuya are a 2-man team, Sasuke pointed out. Yeah, but that was only after they made Chunin, said Ryo. They were on a team with Hana-nichan for 3 years. It was before you knew them, but it was part of the reason I spent so much time at the Inuzuka compound. So the bells are a red herring? Sasuke mused. To make us fight each other, to keep us from working together. 3 Junin fighting each other would be a lot easier to handle than 3 Junin working together. So we need to find Sakura? Sasuke groaned. Maybe we can form a 2-man Genin team. Nii-san would kill us both if we left a teammate to fend for herself. Kakashi is not just going to keep standing there waiting for us. I'll distract him with some clones while we go find Sakura. Sasuke nodded to him, and jumped down from his perch. Ryo formed the hand seal, and with a puff of smoke, 6 clones appeared. You guys know what to do, Ryo ordered. Just distract him. Try not to get hit. Buy as much time as you can. With a chorus of, yes, boss, the clones leapt towards the clearing, the sea of green and yellow making its way to the still-reading Junin. Kakashi showed no response to the collection of Ryos heading in his direction, and Ryo didn't have time to stick around and watch. He followed Sasuke deeper into the trees, as the sounds of yelling and fighting erupted behind them. His friend turned to him expectantly, and Ryo took a deep breath, the smell of Sakura's awful perfume lingering on his tongue. She's this way, he said, leading the other boy on a straight path through the forest. She really needs to stop with the perfume. The enemy could track her miles away. Silence descended for a long moment as Ryo tracked the scent, Sasuke running quietly beside him. They finally came to a small clearing, and Ryo stared at a prone Sakura lying face down in the dirt. Maybe we can form a 2-man Junin team. Sasuke sighed deeply. Nii-san would understand. Sasuke shot him a look, and Ryo let out his own sigh. Nii-san would kick our butts, I know. I vote we hand her over to Kazune or Hana-nichan or something, though. She really needs some sort of wake-up call. Well, Sasuke-kun? Ryo drew out the honorific, in a high pitch, similar to Sakura. Your damsel awaits. The glare of the Uchiha-sen would have melted steel, but Ryo was unaffected. He waved him forward with a grin. Sasuke stomped over to the girl and dumped the contents of his water bottle over her. Sakura shot up, clutching her wet hair. Ryo burst out laughing, clutching his stomach desperately as he sank to the ground. Tears filled his eyes as he wheezed. He didn't hear the exchange between his teammates as he tried to get his breathing under control. He finally sat up, still giggling. Sasuke-kun. Her eyes suddenly filled with tears, and she latched onto the Uchiha's arm. I thought Kakashi-sensei killed you. Ryo's humor died as the words sank in. Sakura, I'm pretty sure that was a genjutsu, he said, the stitch in his side fading. Sasuke violently shook her off and stepped away, using Ryo as a barrier. Ryo was about to say something when memories that weren't his own slammed into his brain. He saw flashes of Kakashi from different angles, and felt phantom pains where Kakashi had hit him in the visions. He opened his eyes, unsure when he had closed them, to see both Sasuke and Sakura staring at him in concern. Ryo? He tried to grin in reassurance to Sasuke, but the memories were still circling his brain. My clones have all been beaten, he said slowly. Kakashi's going to come look for us soon if we don't come up with a plan. How do you know? Sakura demanded. I think I got the memories of the clones after they got hit. That's not how clone techniques usually work, Sasuke pointed out. I know, but that's what happened. Sasuke stared at him for a moment longer before he shook his head. We don't have time to think about that right now, he said firmly. We need a plan to deal with Kakashi. Kakashi's eyes scanned the words on the page, but they didn't sink in. It was clever of Ryo to send out clones to distract him while he went and found his teammates. It gave him hope that he would be passing a team this year. He had dealt with Sakura while she had been on her own, so it would be interesting to see how she bounced back. From what he knew of the genin, she would be the weakest link. He would give them a few more minutes to settle on a plan before he went searching for them. There was only 10 minutes left on the clock, and he still hadn't seen Sasuke or the real Ryo yet. They shouldn't have any problems recruiting Sakura with the uchiha there. They hadn't reacted too much to the idea of missing out on lunch. He should have known better with the boys. Kazuya and Naruto would not have let them step out the door without eating something. Waiting 6 hours for him seemed to be far more upsetting to them. He had wanted to see what they would do in the time they were left alone, to see if there was any independent thinking going on. It was also supposed to make them hungry for lunch, but that had fallen through quite quickly. The boys had been as expected, warming up, stretching, light sparring. By hour 5, however, even they gave up. Sakura had been much worse, spending most of the 6 hours sitting at the side staring at Sasuke. He would really have to do something about that, but he had no idea where to begin. Rin had also been a fangirl, but she had at least taken her kunoichi training seriously. He hoped they passed. He would love to teach Ryo all the things that Minato-sensei had passed on to him. He could help Sasuke with his Sharingan when the boy eventually activated it. He could even help Sakura become more than a fangirl. On the other hand, Naruto would be watching over Ryo's training, so there would be no slacking or half-assing this. He didn't want to disappoint Naruto. He had already let him down enough in this lifetime. Despite only a 3-year age difference, the way he thought of and treated the two Uzumakis was completely different. Naruto was 15 now, and he wasn't that much shorter than Minato-sensei had been. Taller than Kazuya at least, and he hadn't finished growing yet. He's a Tokubetsu Junin, and from what he'd heard, Naruto was higher up the chain of command at the mission assignment desk than anyone really knew. Ryo was still very much a child, but Naruto had been an adult for years already. Kakashi was much closer to his godson, but the friendship between him and Naruto was much better than it used to be. He didn't want to jeopardize that. It had also hurt more than he was expecting to hear Ryo use his name rather than the childish nickname he had been given when the kid was first learning to speak. He knew the genin would be annoyed, but it had to be done. He just hoped that he would understand once it was all over. He didn't want it to seem like he just didn't care about them. He flipped a page in his book. There was movement in the bushes to his left. It seemed that they had finally decided on a plan. Blonde hair popped out between the leaves, and Kakashi turned another page as a horde of Ryos launched themselves towards him. He swayed and bobbed as the clones swung at him with a mixture of kunai and fists. It was the same as he'd tried earlier. Kakashi started taking out clones one by one, not bothering to even look up from the pages. They only had just over 5 minutes now. Stalling is not going to work for them. They must have some other plan. As he punched the last clone in the solar plexus, extracting a pained groan from the kid, he looked up briefly from his book to see a large fireball making its way towards him. So Sasuke was around somewhere too. He stepped out of the way, but as he did, a hail of kunai came towards him, putting him back onto the same spot he'd just been standing in. Another wave of Ryos came out the bushes, and Kakashi repeated the process, dodging the eventual fireball and hail of kunai. He flipped a page as the last kunai landed just beside his foot. The clock ticked closer to noon. They might not do this after all if they couldn't come up with a different strategy. A third wave, and Kakashi was starting to get tired of this. He dispatched the clones in a matter of seconds. "You're running out of time," he called out, his eyes scanning over another page. "You should probably try something else." The clock ticked to 1 minute. Now! Kakashi only had time to look up from his book before he caught sight of a seal mostly buried in dirt. His eyes widened as the world erupted into bangs and flashes, the dirt churned up by the explosives and mixing in the air to kick up dust. He dodged to the side, lowering his book to dance between the explosions which had been placed in a ring around him. The clones must have set them down and all the attacks as a distraction. Not bad at all for Green Genin. He felt a hand brush against his belt, mere inches away from the bells. He grinned as swapped with a log, ending up beside the alarm clock just as it rang out. He stopped the noise as Ryo and Sasuke emerged from the tree line, looking annoyed. Sakura picked herself up from the ground next to the log, wiping the dust out of her eyes. She must have been the one to attempt the grab. The genin gathered in a line in front of him as he tucked his book away. "So, looks like you're going back to the academy," he drawled, watching Ryo and Sasuke's faces ball up in fury as Sakura's fell. "No fucking way are we going back," Ryo finally burst out. "This test was doomed from the start." Sasuke glowered at him, silent, but Kakashi could see the anger in his dark gaze. "One of you has to go back," he shrugged, watching them carefully. Sakura's eyes welled up as she stole glances at her teammates. She began to raise her hand when Ryo grabbed it, shoving it harshly back to her side. "There are always 3 in a genin team," he hissed. "You can't get rid of any of us. If you don't want to be our sensei, just say so." Kakashi let the words float in the air, remaining silent for a long moment. "You agree, Sasuke, Sakura?" he said casually. "You're willing to give a sure chance of becoming a genin to get sent back to the academy together?" Sasuke glanced over at Ryo before he nodded firmly, Sakura still close to tears but following the Uchiha's lead. Kakashi let them suffer for a minute longer before he clapped his hands, switching to a cheerful demeanor, almost instantly. "Then you pass." "What? Oh my fucking kami!" There was a mixture of confusion and frustration as Kakashi smiled at them. "You are now Team 7. He turned and walked towards the memorial stone that stood at the opposite end of the training ground. He heard the genin following after him, still grumbling under their breath. He stopped in front of the slab of stone, taking in the names listed one after the other. "This is the memorial stone," he began. "All the shinobi and kunoichi of Konoha who have fallen in service of Konoha are here. My best friend and my team are here. This place makes me think about the mistakes I've made in the past, and I've made a lot." He turned to them, their faces much more somber now. "In the shinobi world, those who break the rules are scum, that's true. But those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. This is why I tested you the way I did. I had to make sure you knew how to function as a team, to make sure you would stick together when times got tough. You did so, you passed. So the bells were a red herring," Ryo called out triumphantly. "And you were being a dick on purpose," Sasuke added quietly. Kakashi's sweat dropped at their response. "You're free for the rest of the day," he said. "Be back here tomorrow morning at 7. "Wait," Ryo called out before Kakashi could shunshin. "Mi-san said you have to come over for dinner tonight. He says he wants the whole team to celebrate and help us bond or whatever." Kakashi waved his hand dismissively. Sure, tell I'll be there later." He vanished in a puff of smoke, heading in to report that his team had passed. He was pretty sure the other Junin had bets on whether he would or not. But he already knew Genma would win that pot. There had been almost no chance of him failing these kids. But he couldn't let them know that. Sakura stayed a few steps behind the boys as she followed them down the hallway. They had met back up to head to dinner as Sakura had realized that she had no idea where they lived. Ryo had offered to pick her up and guide her there, and she hadn't really had the option of saying no. She hadn't had the option of saying no to this entire dinner, but Sasuke-kun was going to be there, and she couldn't pass up this opportunity. Ino was going to be so jealous. It did mean she would have to meet Ryo's family. She had no idea what to expect. Ryo was loud, boisterous, and had no qualms about being rude to people. His group of friends were at the bottom of the class too, and Sakura was not impressed. Nothing Ryo had done before this impressed her, although it was annoying when he beat her in history. Everyone else agreed. She was always hearing about how much of a nuisance he was and about how he didn't belong. She was in the majority in her thinking. It was why she was so confused about why he was so close to Sasuke. They just didn't fit. Sasuke-kun was Sasuke-kun and Ryo was Ryo. It didn't make sense that they got along so well. They came to a stop in front of a door and Sakura frowned at the loud voices coming through the wood. Ryo turned to Sasuke, an eyebrow raised. "Mi-san or Kazuni?" Could be either. Sakura barely had time to frown in confusion before Ryo barged in through the door, loudly announcing his arrival. He went unnoticed as the voices now reached Sakura clearly. I have told you 1,000 times, Naruto. Do not activate seals on the coffee table. It's not as if I did it on purpose, Kaz. It's a new seal. There are still some things to work out. I have been working on those notes for weeks. I didn't burn them all. Most of it is salvageable. Salvageable? Naruto, most of it is still smoking. What? Oh shit. There was the sound of cloth hitting a metal surface. I promise I'll make it up to you. You will make it up to me and then some. Sakura finally reached the doorframe, peering over Ryo's shoulder. A brunette was in the kitchen area, yelling at a taller redhead. The brunette wore a slightly charred green apron and a tight purple shirt as he waved around a wooden spoon in fury. The redhead was cringing away, his long hair in a high bun, Ino would be jealous of, and waving burnt pieces of paper in the air. His black t-shirt showed off an entire arm of tattoos, and Sakura couldn't help but stare. The brunette huffed and turned back towards the stove, angrily mixing something in a bowl. I can and will throw out any materials left in the family areas, he threatened. Hey, you poisoned me like a month ago when you were distilling some plant in the teapot. I didn't throw out any plants. Oh really? You need to get over that. I bought you ramen. I'll buy you dango. The brunette threw a scrutinizing look over to the other man before he nodded, and the tension in the room dissipated like it had never been. The redhead looked over to the door, and Sakura was taken aback by the long scar running through his face. Ryo, Sasuke! Why are you lingering in the doorway? Get in here! His wide grin matched Ryo's with an eerie accuracy Sakura hadn't been expecting. This must be your teammate, Sakura, right? She smiled nervously as he came forward, towering over them slightly. He ruffled Ryo's hair, and the boy pushed him away, trying to organize his hair back into a bird's nest. He also squeezed Sasuke's shoulder, and Sakura almost saw the Uchiha smile. Sasuke? Smiling. She had never even seen him come close before. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, but just call me Naruto. That over there is Arai Kazuya, and he will be your chef for this evening. Very funny, the other man rolled his eyes. It's nice to meet you, Sakura. Thank you for having me, she politely replied. She was ushered in and she sat carefully on the worn sofa, eyeing the scorch marks on the coffee table nervously. Ryo flopped down, making himself comfortable, and Sasuke joined him, more composed but no less familiar. So Kakashi passed you then? What was the final test? Naruto sat on the other sofa and leaned forward eagerly. It was some dumb test where we had to steal some bells off of him, Ryo shrugged. It was all about teamwork, so obviously we smashed it. Hey, get your feet off the sofa and your head out of your ass. Naruto swiped at his feet, and Ryo lowered them to the floor. Being cocky is a one-way ticket to getting your ass killed. You're a genin now, you have to take all the training and tests seriously. Yes, Ni-san. Ryo sighed. This wasn't matching up at all with what Sakura had pictured. Other than their smile, Ryo and Naruto shared almost no physical traits. Ryo was taller than her, and Sasuke, but Naruto was much taller still. Their hair, their eyes, even their clothing didn't match. Are you actually related? All eyes turned to her as she realized she had said that out loud. Naruto laughed. Yeah, Ryo and I are blood related, he said. We used to get that question a lot. Kazuya is the adopted one. He says that like I'm not the one who adopted them, Kazuya called out from the kitchen. Oh. She wasn't sure what else she could say. This didn't feel like going over to Ino's house when they were still friends. There were no parents here, but the two older boys didn't feel close to their age either. She was out of her comfort zone. Right, come on, get your asses over to the table, Kazuya called. Sasuke, get the nice cups, and Ryo, move your shit. I told you this morning that it needed to be moved before dinner. Ryo let out a long groan. Kazumi? It's not even in the way. Ryo. Fine. The blonde flopped himself off the sofa, gathering a mix of clothes and books away from the kitchen area. Cleaning is just putting stuff in less obvious places. You know that, right? Yes, in places where people won't trip over it. Sakura remained where was, feeling out of place, as the people bustled around like they had been doing it all their lives. Did Sasuke really live here? He seemed way too comfortable to just live next door. So, are you feeling overwhelmed yet? She turned wide, green eyes to Naruto. His grin softened. I remember when I graduated, he said casually. I was so happy, but I kind of felt like I was going to be sick. I was terrified I'd be left behind by my teammates. They were much better than me. It's okay, he smiled. You'll find your footing. Just trust in yourself and you'll do fine. He tapped her shoulder as he stood up, gesturing to her to follow him. She rose to her feet and hesitantly took a seat at the wooden table. There wasn't quite enough room for all the chairs crammed around the table, and Kazuya and Sasuke were placing a variety of dishes on the table in front of her. Am I setting a place for Kakashi? Yeah, he said to tell you that he'd come. Right on time. There was a knock on the door, and their sensei stepped through, throwing out a casual yo. Of course, when it's Nissan, you're on time. Ryo grumbled beneath his breath. I'm pretty sure that's because Naruto scares him. Sasuke leaned over to whisper. Kakashi here. Sakura blinked as Naruto threw something across the room, her new sensei catching it easy. It was a leafy green plant in a tan pot. Congrats on finally passing a team, Naruto grinned. Don't kill it, yeah? Naruto, have a little more faith in me. Sakura looked all around her. Everyone was talking and laughing with each other. Even Sasuke was nodding along to whatever Kazuya was saying. She was a bit lost. This was nothing like her or Ino's house. It was loud and chaotic, and there were about 10 things going on at once, but it was also warm and welcoming and lacked judgment. There were no expectations of her. As Kazuya filled up the plate in front of her for the first time in years, she didn't argue against the portion size. She just picked up her fork and started eating, letting the conversation wash over her. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad being on a team with Ryo if she got to come here. Chapter 25, Use Your Words. She's there. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. I can smell her scent a mile away. You also smelled it back at the market. You need to let that go, Sasuke. She was totally there, but she escaped. I didn't see her. Just trust me, Sakura. She is in that bush. Okay, Sakura, you and Ryo are the closest. On my signal, you both jump at her. Either you catch her or drive her towards me. Okay, Sasuke-kun. I just want this over with. It's been over 2 hours. Ready. Go. Ryo leapt forward, landing on his stomach with his arms outstretched. He groaned loudly as Sakura landed on top of him. This commotion prompted the cat to bolt from the leaves directly into Sasuke's waiting arms. His teammate lifted the cat, stroking her gently and muttering quiet assurances. Ryo shoved Sakura off him gruffly and stood, fruitlessly trying to brush off the dirt and leaves from his jumper. He stopped to glare at the fluffy brown demon now purring happily in Sasuke's arms. Her perfectly tied red ribbon was pristine around her right ear, and her glistening coat didn't have a speck of mud. It was a stark contrast to the state of his team. Even Sakura was dirty, and he didn't think he had ever seen a hair out of place on her before. Well done, my cute little Genin, Kakashi appeared. It only took you 2 hours and 37 minutes. Ryo rolled his eyes and began to walk back to the tower, Sasuke and Sakura following quickly. Things had been slightly better with his godfather since the bell test. He had only even been up to 2 hours late after that, and he didn't play any mind games either. He was still different than he had been growing up, but Ryo knew he had been a bit naive to think it would all have remained the same. Is that good or bad? Sakura asked their sensei as he walked behind them. Well, Naruto's team managed it in 13 minutes back when he was a genin. I don't think that record has been broken yet. 13 minutes? Sakura's voice had a tinge of despair. It took us an hour to even start to track her down. Tora is notorious among the shinobi as the worst D-rank mission. Kakashi had whipped out his book by now. You actually did very well in comparison to most other teams. If Naruto catches you reading that around us, he won't be happy. Sasuke drawled. Ryo grinned as Kakashi tensed up, waving a hand in an attempt to be dismissive. What Naruto doesn't know won't hurt him. Ryo continued walking to the mission assignment desk, sharing a companionable silence with Sasuke as their female teammate continued to pester their sensei. He liked his team. There was a sense of unity and shared experiences that was different to his family. He felt like Sasuke and Sakura viewed him as an equal, and even Kakashi didn't talk down to him. He loved his brothers more than anything in this world, but Ryo knew he would always be a little kid in their eyes. With this team, he felt like he was moving forward. He didn't even care that Kakashi was late to their training sessions. It gave them a chance to stretch and work on their physical conditioning before they got into the team-building exercises and D-ranks that Kakashi had in store for them. Even Sakura now joined them in their laps and reps. What Kakashi had said must have stuck with her. They had been forced to go hiking one day, and it had gotten to the point where all Ryo could hear was Sakura whining and complaining. He had known that she was weaker than him and Sasuke. She trained so much less it was a given, but it was worse than he had thought. He hadn't been sure if it was going to be him or Sasuke that would turn around and kill her, but Kakashi had intervened before they could act. In society, those who don't have many abilities tend to complain more, he had said without even looking up from his book. Sakura had abruptly closed her mouth, and Ryo had snickered at the offended look on her face. She had thankfully remained quiet the rest of the hike, and the next morning actually joined them for laps around the training ground. They broke through the tree line, and Ryo eyed the cat warily. It would be just their luck that the cat would make a break for it. She seemed calm in Sasuke's arms, but he had chased this cat for 2 hours too long to risk anything. He actually wanted to work on his taijutsu today, and he was very close to convincing Kakashi to teach him more ninjutsu. He hated D-ranks. Naruto leaned his head on his fist as he glumly stared down at the documents on the table. Shikaku had asked him to go over recent missions to the Land of Water. They were still trying to figure out how the new Mizukage administration was affecting their missions in that country, or if they needed to start taking the same measures used in the Land of Lightning. He didn't think they needed the extreme protocols in place for the Land of Earth. It didn't help that they hadn't actually met or spoken to the new Mizukage since she had come into power. Remind me to never get stuck in a job with paperwork. He looked up to see Ryo peering at him over the edge of the sofa. I don't recommend it, Naruto chuckled. I think you would go insane if you had to sit still for this long. Can you not ask to be reassigned? His brother flopped back down, out of sight. You're a Junin. They can't waste you behind a desk. Sunshine, I have been working at the desk for 5 years. He placed the page he was reading down. There is a lot of information and connections that only I am privy to, and it would be impossible for me to teach any one Chunin what I know, especially since I'm now organizing the elite Junin missions. He stretched his arms over his head, feeling something crack in his back and his muscles tense pleasantly. Plus, I have to cover the missions involving Fuinjutsu, and I spend a good portion of my time upgrading and monitoring the security of the village. I am not wasted, Sunshine. I'm more useful here than I would be on missions. Ryo rose to stare balefully at him. If you say so, Nissan. Naruto playfully rolled his eyes. He didn't blame Ryo for not understanding. He couldn't have imagined when he was a genin that he would be so deeply ingrained with the paperwork and protocol aspects of the village. He had imagined that he would be off fighting pirates, rescuing villages, determining important foreign decisions. He didn't mind, though. He did like his job, even if it gave him a headache sometimes. Everything he had told Ryo was true, too. He really did know too much to ever leave the desk permanently. He knew there was a large red stamp in his personnel file that identified him as a security risk on missions. It was why he was only let out for the occasional excursion. The mission to Suna was the last time he was allowed to leave the country. There was also the matter of his illness. It was one of the reasons he was kept in the village, although only the Hokage and Shikaku knew that particular piece of information. Others that were better known among the upper administration of the village were his fuinjutsu and sensing abilities. He glanced towards the door as he felt the signatures get close to the apartment. You may want to hide, Sasuke. The Uchiha looked up from his book in alarm as the front door burst open, Kazuya bouncing through the entranceway with a meeker Sakura following close behind. Good morning, family. Haven't we spoken about how much cheerfulness is allowed in the morning? Naruto glared, despite the fact he'd already been awake for hours now. Yes, and I have elected to ignore it. Kazuya dumped a couple of bags right on top of Naruto's paperwork. It isn't my fault you people like to waste so much of the day. Sakura and I have got so much done, and it isn't even time for them to leave for training yet. Sakura placed her bags down more carefully before she looked over and chirped, "Sasuke-kun?" She didn't lunge towards him or start singing his praises unprompted, so that was already an improvement. I mean, officially we start at 7, but we don't really need to be there until 9. Ryo grunted as Momo jumped up to land on his stomach. Naruto bristled, but Ryo continued. "It's fine, Mi-san. You don't have to talk to Kashi-sensei again. We like that he gives a couple hours on our own. We can do the training we want." Naruto leaned back in his chair, deciding to leave that argument for now. He knew Ryo didn't like him getting involved, and that he wanted his independence. He didn't want to smother his little brother, but it was hard. He just wanted the best for him. "So what did you go out so early to do?" He switched his attention back to Kazuya. "We got Sakura some decent kunoichi gear for a start," he grinned, pulling out dark articles of clothing. "This stuff is way more practical for her, and more durable too. If you want to keep your hair long, I can show you how to tie it back properly." Naruto grabbed Sakura's attention away from Sasuke. "I don't recommend it though. That should really wait until you're confident enough in your fighting abilities that you know you can stop an enemy from using it against you." Sakura reached up to grip the ends of the pink strands consideringly. Before she could say anything in response, Naruto felt more signatures approach. "Kazuya, you may want to put on more for breakfast. We're going to have guests." Kazuya raised an eyebrow even as he ditched the bags and turned to grab things in the kitchen. Naruto frowned down at the bags covering his work. Looks like he wouldn't be getting anything more done this morning. He ignored Sakura's confused look as he began to clear the table. "Ryo, Naruto-ni-san, Kazuya-ni-san." Kiba jumped through the open door, Akamaru barking on top of his head. Momo leapt from her place on top of Ryo and ran to greet them. Kiba laughed as he hugged her. "Wow, she's getting so big. Come in so your teammates aren't left in the hallway." He ignored Sakura muttering to Sasuke. How did he know they were coming? He also made it a point to ignore Sasuke's response of, "You get used to it, he's like a weird psychic or something sometimes." He smiled at Hinata and the Aburame as they entered slowly behind their teammate. Hinata had grown so much for that little girl he had met nearly a decade ago. She seemed nervous and a little quiet, but anyone would seem quiet next to Kiba. Aburame was also subdued, and Naruto couldn't see much of his face behind the high collar and the sunglasses. "Are you not going to introduce us?" he asked, amused. Kiba looked up from petting Momo and grinned. Naruto wasn't sure about the fur-lined jacket yet. It made him look like he had a lot more hair than he did. He supposed it added to the slightly feral theme that all Inuzuka had. They'd been spoiled with how clean and put together Hana had been. "Yeah, I really wanted you guys to meet my team. That's Hinata and that's Shino." Shino dropped into a low bow, Hinata squeaking as she abruptly followed suit. It wasn't long before Kazuya came over, waving a wooden spoon. "None of that. First rule of the house, no formalities or bowing of any kind. Second, you are welcome anytime. Make yourself at home." He moved back into the kitchen as Naruto waved at the empty spots on the couch. Kiba had already made himself comfortable beside Ryo, and Sasuke had moved to crouch on the side of the kitchen table, eyeing Sakura warily as she sat on the side of a sofa. Hinata sat like she thought they were going to bite her for doing so. Shino sat down with a perfectly straight back, and what Naruto was guessing was a blank expression. He was hard to read. "So how is your team doing?" Naruto smiled. "You're with Yuhi Kurenai, right?" "Yeah, she's great," Kiba grinned before he grimaced. "She's making us do loads of D ranks, though." "You too?" Ryo groaned. "They suck so bad. We're either babysitting, or painting a fence, or going after that stupid cat. We got taken off the Tora mission since Akamaru almost ate her," Kiba said a little too proudly. "Hey!" Naruto raised an eyebrow as all the genin turned to look at him. "Do you know how important D ranks are?" He heard Kazuya mutter, "Here we go," beneath his breath, and he took a moment to shoot a glare at his friend. "D ranks simulate the higher-ranked missions you'll be taking in the future," he began. "Babysitting is like guard duty. Tora is like tracking down an enemy 9. You get the idea." "And fence painting?" Sakura asked dubiously. "Some stuff is just needed for the community. Naruto shrugged, prompting a round of complaints. It helps both the village and the genin financially too. Keeps the economy ticking over, and the orphan genin who no longer have access to the orphan fund still have an income to live on. I never thought about that, Kiba said, his volume much lower. It's my job to think of these things. Naruto waved a hand dismissively. D-Ranks pretty much paid for this apartment and everything else when Rio was little. He missed Rio's frown at his words. Really? Sakura asked curiously. How many did you have to do? Too many to count. He laughed. I'm pretty sure the registry has the real number somewhere. Was it 2 or 3 a day? Kazuya turned to face him, hand on his hip as something sizzled behind him. It depended on when the rent and bills were due. I think there was one winter we did at least 10 a day between us for a week. Naruto grimaced as he thought back to that week. Maybe the genin had a point about D-Ranks. So what else are you up to, Team 8? Kazuya continued, flipping something in a pan. Hinata? The Hyuga startled, and Naruto nodded encouragingly at her. Kurenai-sensei wants us to work on our flexibility, she said quietly, almost whispering. Oh, you should ask me-san. Rio leaned forward eagerly. He does all sorts of weird stretches every morning. Thanks, Sunshine. Naruto raised an eyebrow before explaining further. My taijutsu style needs flexibility and mobility, so I've been doing them since I was in the academy. It's definitely a great skill set to have beyond making sure you don't pull something. Oh man, was it ever? Kazuya sighed. Genma-sensei used to do this exercise with us every morning. He would throw paint-covered kunai at us until we could dodge them for a full 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but I can assure you it is. Naruto was always the best since he could bend over backwards to dodge. I still think it was because he was so small. I've been taller than you for over a year now, Kazuya, Naruto chuckled. Let it go. He paused as he noticed the silence that had descended over the room. The genin looked horrified and a bit scared. Even Sasuke had a look of dread across his face. Please never mention that training exercise to Kakashi-sensei, Rio asked desperately. He doesn't need any ideas. Or Kurenai-sensei? Kiba added quickly. Naruto laughed as Kazuya dumped a cup of green tea and an orange on the coffee table in front of him. Naruto, eat this. Rio, Sasuke, Kiba, come help with the final bits and pieces. The 3 boys followed him into the kitchen, and Naruto took a sip, beginning to peel the fruit. He may have been able to hide the worst symptoms, but Kazuya was getting suspicious. Every morning he gave an orange to him slightly more forcefully. I had a question about your name, Uzumaki-san, Shino said quietly. The reason why? It is the same as the deceased son of the Yondaime, and you are the right age. Oh, wow. Naruto buried the nerves that rose at the question. I haven't been asked about that in a long time. The Yondaime's son was a bit older than me. My parents decided that being named the same as someone famous would be a great idea. It led to a lot of confusion, especially just after the Kyuubi attack, but he had blonde hair and weird whisker marks on his cheeks. Blonde like Rio? Sakura piped up. A bit darker, and he had blue eyes, Naruto supplied. People used to talk about him a lot when I was younger. It died down after I started the academy. I can't believe people still think that. He ignored the looks that Rio and Sasuke shot at him from the kitchen. At least Kazuya was subtle about it. Right? Kazuya clapped his hands. Everyone grab a plate and a chair and sit down. Hinata and Sakura immediately began to protest, and he could see Shino gearing up to join them. He shared a look with Kazuya as he grabbed his cup and rose to his feet. He would let him handle this one. Sakura, it's best you learn now that you can't escape mealtimes anymore. There will be no diets while you're a part of Team 7 and this household. Anything you eat is going to be burned off training, and do you really want me to go through the nutrition lecture again? He didn't even stop to breathe when he turned on the members of Team 8. You are on a team with Kiba, and Kiba has been a part of this family since the kid was still learning how to spell. You are now honorary members of the Uzumaki household, and there is nothing you can do to change that. That's part of being a Jonin team. You're stuck with each other now. So grab a plate and help yourself to breakfast. Naruto grabbed one for himself as he smiled. It was always entertaining when Kazuya flipped on his mother hen mode, when it wasn't directed at him anyway. They would learn that it was just easier to accept the food and the open door available to them. Kazuya ruffled Ryo's hair as he grinned. "That's your first aid training done for today," he said cheerfully. "I'll be back next week, so see how much you remember." He waved goodbye as he left the training ground, heading back towards the village. He was determined to drum some sort of medical knowledge into the Genin's skulls. Even something as simple as chest compressions and bandages could help save someone on a mission or something. He scheduled it for a couple of hours before Kakashi actually turned up. He had work later, so there wasn't any other time to do it. As he entered the village proper, the street filling up even this early in the morning, he waved back awkwardly at a guy outside the bakery. He quickly walked by, hoping he wouldn't be dragged into a conversation. The guy had been a great hookup, but Kazuya wanted to make sure that was all he was. He hadn't been in a real relationship since Tetsuya-san. Not that he minded. He was following Genma-sensei's tactics of one-night stands and drunken hookups. He wasn't sure he was ready to have anyone else in his life right now. He'd had such a hard time balancing everything the first time, and he didn't want to neglect his family again. He never took them home either, so he was managing to keep his love life and his family life far away from each other. It gave him more time to notice things, about Naruto in particular. He definitely wasn't eating as much, and Kazuya had come home to find him wrapped up in a blanket with Momo one too many times to be nothing. The redhead kept insisting that he was just tired from working so much, and while Kazuya could agree with that, he was sure there was something else. He had his suspicions, but without proof there wasn't much he could do. "Kazuya-san?" He turned to see a man approach, and he smiled. "Iruka-san, it's been a while." After that first disastrous meeting at the academy, Kazuya had managed to smooth things over. Naruto could be too protective sometimes, and he didn't want Iruka to think that they had it out for him. Fortunately, the man had been more than accommodating when Kazuya had spoken to him alone. He was nice. Kazuya had made the effort to say hello in the year since. "Not working today?" Iruka stopped in front of him, his own smile pulling at the scar across his nose. "In the afternoon," he shrugged. "Since the graduation exam, we've been getting more accidents, so they want me in earlier." Iruka grimaced. "I can imagine that some of those are my former students." "Officially, I cannot say yes to that," Kazuya winked. "Of course," Iruka rolled his eyes playfully. "Hey, you don't start at the academy for another hour, right?" Kazuya said casually. "Come and get some tea with me. There's a place that does an amazing ginger and honey one nearby." Iruka quickly agreed, and before Kazuya knew it, he was sitting across from the academy teacher with his hands wrapped around a warm mug. "So why are you roaming the village this early?" Iruka asked, taking a sip of his own tea. "I was teaching Ryo, Sasuke, and Sakura some first aid. Kami knows that they are going to need it sometime in the future, and it's not as if the academy taught them any." He froze as he realized who he was talking to. Perhaps he shouldn't go on one of his rants about the curriculum with the man who taught it right in front of him. He was surprised when Iruka started laughing. "Yeah, I know what you mean," he agreed. "There is stuff that I would rather be taught in the academy, but most people want them to learn it as a genin." Kazuya continued to stare at him. "Even the teachers can have opinions on the curriculum, you know?" Iruka raised an eyebrow at him. "We just can't change it." "Who can? Someone in the education department at the Hokage offices? Or the Hokage himself?" Kazuya pondered this. "I could ask Naruto to speak to someone there," he thought out loud. "I'm pretty sure he's managed to worm his way into every department in some way or another." He paused. "For someone that is so busy with work and seals and the kids, he finds a way to get to know more people than I've ever spoken to, and that's saying something." "You wouldn't think so either, he's such a hermit." He finally noticed Iruka's expression. "Oh, sorry," he said sheepishly. "I know you guys didn't get off on the right foot." No, it's not his fault," Iruka waved a hand quickly. He had a point. I mean, look at what happened with Mizuki. Kazuya frowned as Iruka's face dropped at his name. "Hey, it's not your fault either. He was my friend, I should have known." "You can't know everything about your friends. I heard that even his fiancée didn't know." Iruka scoffed. "I doubt that. It's a rare day that someone outdoes me in gossip," Kazuya grinned, trying to bring the mood back up. Did you hear about Yamanaka Ryugi and Takayama Shina? Apparently they are a thing, but Takayama's mother doesn't approve, so he was caught hanging from her window with his pants down. His plan succeeded as Iruka huffed a quiet laugh. Sounds like a disaster. Oh, I know it was, Kazuya laughed. Nothing compared to what was found in Anko's desk, though. It's Anko, Iruka deadpanned. Short of the Hokage's body, I don't think there's anything off-limits for her. That's the fun part. Kazuya continued to enlighten the academy teacher with the latest in the Konoha gossip mill. He knew it was a bad habit, but there was always that spark of excitement when he heard something new about someone. He liked to reason that it was a part of being a shinobi, intelligence gathering and knowing your fellow shinobi. Naruto said he was a shameless gossip. He liked to think they were both right. He continued to drink his tea and laughed as Iruka responded with his own observations. This was nice. It was much easier to be his friend since the kids had graduated. He hoped they could keep this in the future. Sometimes he just needed to talk to someone that he didn't live or work with. Naruto dumped the pile of papers onto Sara's desk, prompting the receptionist to look up. She looked at him for a moment before her gaze dropped to the paperwork, her stare turning dark. Thanks. I'm sorry, Sarah, he smiled weakly, knowing the pain written across her face well. There have been several missions resulting in injuries that are stopping us from assigning missions. We need the sign-off so we can send them out again. It's fine, she sighed. It's not your fault, although you are usually the bearer of bad news. Anything that can get me out of the office for a while? Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. I'm pretty sure if I didn't do these runs, Shikaku would probably drag me out of the office himself. At least now I can tell him that I haven't been stuck at a desk all day. Sarah grabbed the papers and tried to place them neatly into a tray, but several ended up falling to the floor. Naruto watched her stare at them for a long moment, an air of deep wariness surrounding her. He could sympathize. Her desk already looked like a wind jutsu had blown through. They really needed another receptionist on shift with her. You may have left your desk, but I don't think it counts as not working. She looked back up at him. Do you ever actually take time off? Yes, Naruto frowned. I trained last Sunday. Sarah raised an eyebrow before she shook her head, muttering about Shinobi. Naruto dismissed it. Civilians never really understood that training was downtime for them. How are things here? Naruto abruptly changed the subject. Looks like you're just as busy as I am. One of the doctors is on maternity leave, and another got poached for a mission, so we're a bit short-staffed. That explains why I haven't seen Kazuya in a couple weeks. Naruto, he turned to see the man himself. Hey, Kaz? He grinned. I was just saying I haven't seen you in a while. The kids might just starve at this rate. They vetoed ramen last week, so I'm out of options. Sasuke is just barely keeping us going, but I'm ready to veto tomatoes. His friend didn't laugh like Naruto thought he would. He didn't even smile. He just continued to stare grimly at Naruto. It was unnerving. I need to talk to you. He exchanged a confused look with Sara at Kazuya's tone. Okay, lead the way, he said, following Kazuya to one of the examination rooms. His friend's body language was full of anger, his beige medical coat billowing behind him as he stomped along. Naruto stood in the middle of the room as Kazuya slammed the door shut, whirling around to face him. Kazuya, what's wrong? He asked, the worry creeping in. Kazuya remained silent for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me you were getting worse? Naruto's heart dropped. What? Why didn't you tell me you were getting worse? Naruto's mouth was dry and his stomach churned uncomfortably. And don't tell me you're not, or that it's only small things, or that I'm overreacting. Tell me the truth. Naruto swallowed. How did you find out? Naruto, I spoke to Team 9. They told me about your little incident that they wrote off as not eating enough. Kazuya's eyes were blazing. I also spoke to Shikaku and Hijiri and Toichi, and with enough pieces, the picture starts to come together. Wait, did you ask around about me? Naruto asked in shock. What if one of them starts to catch on? Well, it's not as if you gave me much of a choice. Kazuya threw up his hands in frustration. Naruto, I'm supposed to help you. I'm supposed to be the one who makes sure you don't fall into the grave earlier than you have to due to your inability to take care of yourself. Naruto opened his mouth but no words came out. Kazuya held his angry posture for another minute before he just deflated the fight, leaving him in a long, deep sigh. Please, Naruto, just tell me what's going on. He closed his mouth, his decision already made. He owed Kazuya a lot. He knew he should have told him a while ago. I have been getting worse, he admitted quietly, for a while now. How long? He hesitated, knowing this might crush his friend. Naruto, when did it start getting worse? In the middle of Ryo and Sasuke's 3rd year. Naruto felt the lump in his throat become almost unbearable at the distraught expression that swept over his friend. Almost 2 years, Kazuya whispered. You've kept this from me for almost 2 years. Kaz. How did I not notice? Kazuya wasn't listening to him. There had to have been signs. I can't have missed them all. I live with you for Kami's sake. How didn't I notice? Kazuya! He began to panic as he watched the guilt begin to consume his friend. It's not your fault. I was really careful to hide everything. At his words, the guilt was replaced with anger once again, and while Naruto hated Kazuya being mad at him, he would take it over the guilt any day. What are your symptoms? Just tired. Naruto shot out before his form slumped. A lot tired. Dizzy and some aches and pains, like I've done nothing but train and not eaten for a month. I don't really eat as much either. Kazuya sat down heavily on the examination table. Naruto considered stopping, but he owed it to him, coughing blood too, some vomiting. Kazuya was silent for a long moment. That's everything? Yes. Okay. The silence returned and Naruto didn't want to be the one to break it. He knew why he didn't tell Kazuya, but it didn't do anything to soften the guilt he felt. He felt like he betrayed him. Why didn't you tell me, Naruto? Am I really so unreliable? No. Naruto yelled at him. No, it's not you. I just didn't want to tell you because you deserve better than looking after me. I don't need you to. You have more to do in your life than fuss over me. Hiding and suffering in silence isn't helping me either. Kazuya shot back up. I don't want you to struggle through this on your own. I would take every difficult or uncomfortable moment any day over playing pretend like you do with everyone else. I don't want to burden you. That should be my choice. It's going to be hard enough when the time comes. I don't want to live the rest of my life thinking that I could have done more or that I abandoned you. Grief is hard enough to live with. Naruto leveled him with a firm stare. You are going to bury me one day in the not-so-distant future. I can at least try and make things easier on you when I'm still alive. I know I'm going to hurt you. Just because you're going to die doesn't invalidate the days you're already living. Kazuya's eyes met his in equal challenge. You could have died randomly from an enemy nin or a seal or something. Fuck, you still can. The difference is, you're not sitting there thinking about it every day. You're just living, and you don't have to filter and hide the hard and ugly parts about you because you don't think about it. Naruto looked away as Kazuya's gaze softened. We're your family, Naruto. We're going to love and support you regardless, but you can't shut us out. Can you imagine what would happen if I told Ryo? He would spend the next 5 years worrying about me like you are now. I want him and Sasuke and Hana and everyone to just live their lives without that hanging over their heads. It makes it easier for me to deal with. What do you think they will feel when they find out that you've been lying to them this whole time? Do you know how hard it is to lose someone? Can you imagine having those thoughts on top of dealing with that grief? I was there when my parents died. I think I know a thing or two about losing your family. Kazuya cringed at his words. I didn't even have time to process it or deal with it because I needed to make sure that Ryo's caretakers didn't forget to feed or bathe him, and make sure we had clothes and a roof, and a way to survive the aftermath. I know exactly how hard it is, and I know if someone told me that day that they would die, I would have done nothing. Not think about it. All the happy and wonderful times would have been tainted with that knowledge. I don't want that for them. Those memories are going to be tainted anyway when they find out after. Kazuya pointed out, you just won't be around to deal with it. That's not fair. Then why tell me in the first place? Kazuya crossed his arms. Why tell Shikaku or Genma or anyone for that matter? Because I was 7 and you are my best friend. Naruto burst out, tears prickling at the corner of his eyes. Kazuya was taken aback. Shikaku and Genma found out accidentally or by something outside of my control. You're the only one I've ever told. Naruto. He could see Kazuya's own eyes start to glisten. I just want what's best for you. I owe you so damn much, and if I can help you live the days you have left just a little easier and happier, I want to do that. You aren't sparing me from anything. It's worse for me when you leave me out. Okay, Naruto nodded. I won't hide it from you anymore. I'm sorry, Kazuya. I just wanted to give you some sort of normal life. Kazuya stepped forward and placed his hand on his shoulders. Naruto, a life without you, all of you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is not a life I want. I'm already going to have too many years without you. I don't want to miss out on anything right now. Naruto pulled him in for a hug, holding him tightly. He closed his eyes and let himself enjoy the warmth and safety that always came with Kazuya. He didn't know what he did to deserve a brother like this, but he was eternally grateful that Kazuya spoke to him in that academy classroom a decade ago. You know you can't hide this forever, Kazuya murmured into his shoulder. Naruto just held him tighter. I know. Thank you for watching part 5 of What If Naruto Parents Died and Naruto Becomes Shinobi to Protect His Brother. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Anime T23 for more exciting what-if scenarios and anime content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.